So missed after the last year. We're waiting for one board member, but we won't wait much longer. So let's we'll go ahead and begin. To view this meeting's presentation documents, please access Board Docs. The link to the Board Docs website can be found via D38 website, which is www.lewispalmer.org, on the Board of Education meetings webpage. To view the live stream video of this meeting, please go to the Lewis Palmer District 38 YouTube page. Could we get a roll call?
We're assuming Mr. Costs will be here momentarily. Ms. Phillips? Here. Mr. Schwartz?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Ms. Upchurch? Here.
Thank you. We're really pleased tonight to have a national anthem by our Palmer Ridge High School Brass Trio. Let me give you I'm just going to share your names. Sorry. So we have Gabby Ward. Raise your hand. Thank you. We have Patrick Kenny. Thank you. And we have Paige Alsup. Go ahead. Thank you.
Great job. Great job.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Any comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none. Ms. Wood?
Aye.
Aye.
Taylor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So we have a lot of recognitions tonight, which is an awesome experience. I've missed these type of meetings.
Here up at the front. And I'm going to come around just to try to make it a little more personal. You want to come through, Ms. Phillips? So this is a little impromptu for me as well. Mr. Taylor just asked me if I could say a few words. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to do that without some emotion behind this. Dr. Benton, as many of you hopefully have had the opportunity to get to know, has been an educator in our system for the past 20 years. She's also a parent in our system. When you think about the qualities of the individuals that compose our school district, you embody so many of the values that I know we all hold close to our hearts, and on behalf of all of our kids. And this room, it's appropriate that I think it's filled with so many, because I think it speaks to the fact that you've had a lot of impact for many, many years. And we could go on and on and on in terms of what that impact has been. Personally, even though I've only had a couple of years, it's been a couple of amazing years, not without all sorts of challenges and fun opportunities to collaborate and to lead and to serve. And I know that you are making a decision that is absolutely great for you, and we wish you so well in your future endeavors. But we thought it was appropriate and only fitting that we just took a moment to celebrate with you. Fantastic service, again, to District 38. It's just remarkable to think about what it's going to look like without you. But you will not be missed, or excuse me, you will be... That was not a slip. You will not be forgotten, is what I wanted to say. See, it's very human. And will be essentially missed, and I will be thinking about you very often. And I know you're not far. You're going to continue to be a community member and continue to do great things in those future pathways. So, again, I could go on and on, but I think the flowers were one of the things that we wanted to bestow. And
On behalf of the board, thank you for all your thorough presentation, for how articulate you are, and how always helpful you were when we called on you. So thank you.
Thank you. That was impromptu, and they're the best. Next, we have a music education recognition for D38 teachers and students, and Ms. Teresa Phillips is going to lead that conversation and recognition.
Lewis Palmer School District 38 has once again been recognized as a recipient of the Best Communities for Music Education Award by the National Association of Music Merchants. D38 music educators, Butch Eversole and Tom Chapman, are here this evening and will give us a little bit of the highlights of the music programs and this award. And then after that, I'd like to list the students one by one.
Is it okay to use this one? Oh, it's on even. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Tom Chapman, the director of bands over at Lewis Palmer High School, and I wanted to take a moment right at the top to talk about what the award is that we got from the National Association of Music Merchants, because it's an award that's not just based on the work of the adults that are in the room. It's also an award that's based on the work of our students and the practice that they put in at home, all the work that they put in preparing extra auditions for everything that they do. For many of our musicians, this is a 7-year commitment that takes up a significant amount of time for when they're in the classroom and outside of the classroom, as is represented by many of our all-state participants this evening. But it's also a huge reflection on our community, and that includes our administrators and our parent and just general community, because programs like this that we have in Lewis Palmer don't exist because one person wants it to be that way. It exists because of an entire community wanting excellence for our students in everything that they do. And music is just one of the many things that we do at a high level in this district. And so it's not only a recognition of the work that all of our music teachers, K through 12, do in this district, or the recognition of the outstanding work of our students, but all of our community members. Thank you so much for supporting what is music in this school district. So thank you.
I'm much shorter than Tom. I'd also first like to also recognize Aaron Miller, the choir director at Lewis Palmer High School, who's also here this evening. We're going to recognize our all-state students this evening. These students, in order to be selected for all-state, you have to prepare a very difficult audition and submit a recording of that audition that is judged by university professors specialists on each instrument, and sometimes there's upwards of 800 students that audition for these groups. Represented tonight, you'll see All-State Choir, which is eligible to only 11th and 12th graders, All-State Band, which is eligible to 11th and 12th graders, All-State Orchestra, which is open to sophomores as well as juniors and seniors, and All-State Jazz Band, which is open through grades 9 through 12. These students, especially this year, it was so easy to become unmotivated, and but our students really knocked it out of the park with the huge numbers and the huge success that they had. And they reflect not only their own individual musicianship, but really all the students, as Tom mentioned, K-12 and all the students that are starting in 6th grade on up, are really working together collaboratively and pushing each other to higher and higher things. And then when these students receive these accolades, they create great models and great leadership within the programs that, even though many of them are graduating, will leave that legacy and that model for others to follow. Thank you.
So with that, I know that not all of the students are here, but I'm going to list the names, and if you hear your name, and even if I don't pronounce it correctly, I apologize ahead of time, just come on up here, and then maybe we can get a photo at the end. So from Palmer Ridge High School, All-State Band honorees are Paige Alsop, bass trombone, Mark Bernard, clarinet, Katie Betts on the horn, Laura Lambrecht on oboe, and Gabby Ward on trombone. From Palmer Ridge High School All-State Orchestra, Ruby Bales, Mark Bernard, you can take a step forward again if you want. Caden Chow, Elizabeth Clenard, Raleigh Eversole, Laura Lambrecht, Xander Owen, and Gabby Ward. Palmer Ridge All-State Jazz, Raleigh Eversole. And Palmer Ridge All-State Choir, Rihanna McHugh. Lewis Palmer High School All-State Band, Annabelle Hall. And Lewis Palmer High School All-State Orchestra, Jack Shimon. Lewis Palmer High School All-State Jazz Band, Jack Shimon. And Lewis Palmer High School All-State Choir, Caroline Diambra. I know there's some other students on the side. Oh, okay. I wanted to make sure we didn't miss you. So congratulations to each of you. I know personally how much investment it takes to accomplish what you've accomplished. And I had the pleasure of hearing a few of you at the recent Solo and Ensemble Festival. And it is really, truly inspiring. If you ever get a chance to hear these music, it might light up your day. So congratulations.
Our next recognition is for D38 Registered Nurses, and Dr. Rick Frampton is going to introduce 6 of our registered nurses for special recognition.
Well, good evening, board. Good evening, community. This is a special opportunity to honor these 6 ladies and all the efforts that we've made to keep schools open this year and all that we've had to do in this incredibly difficult year to keep kids safe and healthy. Most of you know we were open in person and learning when others weren't, when most others weren't in August and September. The fact that we were able to keep schools open from the very first day to now and the very last day at the end of this week, most of the credit goes to right here. Yes. I think it's quite easy to say and probably understated to say this might have been the hardest year to be a healthcare practitioner ever, especially in the schools. So we just wanted to take this time to honor you, thank you for the endless number of hours, evenings. I was on the phone with each and every one of you at least once on a Sunday evening when we should have been eating dinner with our families. And when I say at least once, it's probably been dozens of times for some of you. And we owe you a lot for being in this place and getting to where we are as successful as we have. So this is a thank you to you all. And just so you know, we have Donna Meyer, and Donna is at Lewis Palmer High School and Lewis Palmer Middle School. Lorma Torres is working with our homeschool academy and our transitions over at Grace Best. Annie Vandenbush is Prairie Winds Elementary and Palmer Ridge High School. Stacy Pierce is at Lewis Palmer Elementary and Kilmer Elementary. We have Ann Colby, and Ann is at Palmer Lake and Bear Creek. And Kathy Amhouse is our jack of all trades. She is everywhere, and so she's working to support our students in all of our buildings. And this is a bittersweet evening because Stacy Pierce, who has really taken the lead for a lot of our COVID work and was a co-COVID coordinator with me and collaborator, is not returning next year. And she's going to be impossible to replace, and I'm personally super sad to lose you, and I know this team is going to feel your absence every single day. So thank you for all you've done. The yellow lilies that are in front of you, there's a old wise tale that those are given in times of gratitude, and we thought that this would be a perfect time. So thank you, everybody, for our nurses.
Dr. Benton, you know, it is a bit emotional tonight. You got it all started. Anyway, the next item is our District Accountability Advisory Committee update and recognition, and Dr. Lori Benton, our Chief Academic Officer, who serves as a liaison to the DAC, will introduce Nanette Walker-Smith.
So first of all, I want to say thank you. So Nanette and Kelly, come on up. So Nanette has served on DAC for 9 years? 8 years? I can't keep track. We've all been around for a while. And she was able to come on board as DAC co-chair 2 years ago and help us navigate a completely unprecedented DAC experience where we got to do all of our meetings electronically. And so a personal thank you because she just rolled with the punches. We adjusted, it was great, and we had the best attendance, believe it or not, of any DAC meeting because it was virtual. So we're going to change things up based on Nanette's leadership and do a combination of in-person and virtual meetings moving forward. So, you know, might as well take advantage of a crisis to make sure we do some positive change. So thank you to Nanette, and we did send you a challenge coin so that you got that from us as a memento for time served with us.
And so Nanette's going to share some of the updates of this year's DAC, but I also want to introduce and thank Kelly Bain, who is going to be coming on for the next 2 years as our DAC co-chair. So we stagger our chairs so we can learn from each other and all of that. And Kelly's been a part of Lewis Palmer BACs, SACs, whatever you want to call them, for a long time as well. So thank you for being here. Thank you for coming on board, and thank you for your service. So I'm going to... That's the best part. All right. Do you want to face that way?
So I'm going to kind of stand in the middle here. So Kelly, you can sit down if you want. I'm going to give you a little bit of a quick background about what DAC is all about. District Accountability Advisory Committee is a committee of parents, administrators, and teachers from the entire district, so that we meet about 5 times a year, and we go through the variety of things that involve the district that are not necessarily always in front of everybody's faces, as well as we address some of the important things like the unified improvement plans and things that all of the schools have to do, and we review those with the principals and with Lori. I don't know who's going to replace you, because it's like, oh my God. But anyway, these are the kind of things that help keep us in one of the operating highest districts in the entire state of Colorado. And they're important because what it allows us is allows the community, parents, the administration, and the teachers to all have a voice. The schools and the students don't have a full voice unless everybody's involved. It's part of one of the committees is called the CFP, or the Community Family Planning Group, and they talk about everybody working together to make sure that the students get what they need to get out of their schools. And that's one of the groups that we review each time. There's other groups like the SEAC, which is the Special Education Group. There's the GELT, which is the Gifted and talented groups, those kind of groups, and they do reports for us frequently. There's also Dr. Brahm, who comes back to us with all of the testing information, which is what Dr. Benton used to do, which I learned more than I ever thought possible with statistics, because she talks really, really fast. But I would come out of those meetings understanding so much more about what testing was all about, and not sometimes going, okay, yeah, I agree with that. No, I don't agree with that. But it was so much more information than just reading a headline in a newspaper. So those things are all really, really important. And as the advisory committee, we don't make change, but we can get information from the school board, or the school board can task this group with items to look at and say, this is what we advise, or what we would think that the school board should do, or make sure that you look at these. These guys do tons of work. Voluntarily, they're doing things all the time for the district. And so sometimes when it has to do with the community, the teachers, the administration, things like that, they'll bring it down to the DAC committee so that we can take it and make sure that there's not things that are missing, and we are able to address it, because we're parts of the community, the parents and the teachers. And that's the whole part of DAC. If you're really interested in really helping the students make it through and make it good, this is the committee you should be on. Each school sends an administrator, a teacher, and the chair of their BAC or their SAC to the DAC group. It's not a ton of time, but it gets you involved. It gets you to different parts of the school is, rather than just reading certain things in the newspaper, or reading, things on various social media platforms and things like that. But it really gives you the opportunity to see what's going on in the background and make effective change. And it's a very, very good way to learn those things. This is something that my Master's of Education never taught me. I say that, and I've actually got that. So it was amazing to learn some of these things. So in that effect, there's a lot of various things. We kind of have a set schedule that we go through each year that Kelly will be part of continuing on as we go, and that follows a kind of sort of a rubric, if you will, as we go through the year. And then there'll be other things that we shuffle along so that we make sure that everybody has times. It's one of the most well-efficient run meetings ever, because it starts and ends on time. Ever. And I'm not used to that, so it's really kind of nice. And it keeps me in control. So anyway, working with these guys has been fabulous, and I don't quite know what I'm going to do next year without doing it because I've been doing it so long, and I really do enjoy it. It's kind of one of those weird things that I do. Christy Milks is the other person that is the other co-chair. She's got 1 more year left. Again, like Dr. Benton said, we rotate those through, and we started doing that probably 7 years ago. And that was just because so that if one person's not able to make it, there's another person that can kind of make sure that the group goes along. And then there's also somebody that's been through it once and is not just kind of walks in and goes, you know. So it's really kind of a nice way to do those things. But again, I really encourage you. The idea is to get that information back out then to the community, the parents, and the teachers. And that's supposed to be what's happening. And that's the other part that we really need to get going on. So I think that having the hybrid system that we've kind of stumbled on by accident, I mean, COVID's been a real pain in the you-know-what, but it's really done a really positive thing too, in that people are learning how to utilize other means of getting information out there so that everybody's got access to it. And the hybrid system, when I teach online and things like that, it's really actually made it well so that we get more people coming, because I'm telling you, starting a meeting at 7 o'clock at night, everybody's like, no, I don't want to do this. But if they can do it from home, it makes it really good. So if we get more people there, that more information will get out to the public. So it'll be really good. So all the best, Kelly. All the best, Dr. Benton. You're going to be sorely missed. It's going to be rough. Thank you very much, everybody.
Our next agenda item is our public comments. Ms. Wood, did we have any electronic submissions? No? Very good. Tiffany Upchurch, could you read the preamble?
Per board policy BEDH, public participation at school board meetings, there is one time for public comment and it is limited to 30 minutes. In an effort to allow all who wish to speak, the amount of time dedicated to each speaker will be dependent upon the number of people who sign up, with the entire public comment period not to exceed 30 minutes. If 10 people or fewer sign up, each person will have 3 minutes to address the board. During meetings held through electronic participation or a combination of electronic and in-person due to physical distancing requirements, members of the public shall be allowed to address the board by sending written comments to Vicki Wood, Secretary of the Board. The board respects the rights of the public to speak on matters concerning the operations of the schools. We believe that the public comments that are critical to district staff, however, often cause unnecessary harm to those employees and to the education of our students. As a result, we prefer that members of the public share any criticisms of employees in writing with the superintendent, who is responsible for supervising all staff, and then involving the board as necessary. If you choose instead to address a personnel issue publicly, please understand that the board does not endorse the comments of any speaker and reminds all who speak that they assume the risk of legal action by district employees in the event an affected employee believes that any comment about them violates legal standards. Lastly, keep in mind we have K-12 students in the audience, so please keep all comments appropriate to our audience.
Thank you, Ms. Upchurch. So I'm just going to go through the list. It's a long list, so we're going to have to limit every individual's time to 3 minutes, and I'll use my phone to track that. And I will start with Kathy Wolford.
This is better. Over here. So we got an email this weekend saying that according to Governor Polis's recommendation, that students of age 11 and up would have to continue to wear masks unless they could prove that they were fully vaccinated. So everything about that to me is completely wrong. These kids aren't in danger of dying from COVID, and to have to wear them at school this whole time, in my opinion, was wrong. But then to demand experimental vaccinations on children, I don't get where this is a good thing. And I'm kind of appalled that anybody could even consider that that's a good idea. So I did call the governor's office and ask where he's getting his funding and ask how many pharmaceuticals are backing him. And I'm wondering that about our government in DC too. So I think we need to follow the money and find out where this is going, because vaccinating children is wrong. Thank you.
I want to hear as many as possible. We only have 30 minutes, so, you know, I do want to hear as many as possible. So Scott Saunders. And since we have so many, you might try and limit it to maybe 2.5 or 2. And thank you for your comment.
I'll try and go real quick.
Thank you.
D38 policy right off your website is a non-discrimination notice. This applies to students. It says D38 is a policy of non-discrimination in relation to race, creed, color, sex, ancestry, sexual orientation, religion, origin, age, or disability. And I saw that email that came out, and that's clearly age discrimination. What are you gonna do? Have a kid turn 10, turns 11, and then we put a face muzzle on him? It's wrong. Totally wrong. When we look at the vaccine itself, the comment was already made, it's an experimental vaccine not approved by the government. Injecting our kids with that is totally, totally wrong. Next, there's a study that just came out that showed over the last 20 years of vaccines, we've had more people die from COVID-related vaccine incidents than we had in the last 20 years for all vaccines. Please reconsider. Don't inject our kids with this. And last, you've got no provision for people that maybe had COVID and they have the antibodies. It's just not right. Those people are safe. They have no need for that. So what I want to suggest, the kids don't need it. They're healthy, and I'm going to be very fast. What I ask for, no mask anywhere, inside, outside. The pandemic's over. We need to move on. Very last, look at what MA did. They led in a way. It's not my first choice, but as a backup, consider the mask exemption. We need parents in control, not Governor Polis, not health boards. And the El Paso County Health Board said the exemption works. So as a backup, allow parents the right to make an exemption. Let them decide what's best for their kids. Parents, not bureaucrats, need to be in control. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew Olferts? Andy?
Oh, come on now, Chris. Thank you, sir. So I see this as an attempt to force vaccinate children. It's a forced vaccination attempt on all of us, and they have us in a corner, right? That's how they see it. If you're part of they, I'm sorry for you. But I'm not part of they, and I think a lot of you feel the same exact way, that we are being overrun in our own country right now. And if Monument, Colorado, the most conservative town in this frickin' state, if we can't lead on this, and we can't get out there and protect our kids and protect those people that we love, who in the world is going to do it? Amen. Seriously. This is a town full of businessmen and businesswomen, leaders, people that were educated by this school system, are the best educated people that I've ever come across. Okay? I've worked with people from all over the world in the oil field, and I have never met anybody that's educated like people from this school system. I didn't even graduate this school system, but I was here. I have a GED, and I'm more intelligent than 99.9% of the people in this country. This is a great school district, okay? You guys are awesome. Thank you for what you do. We're so grateful for you. And basically everything that I wanted to say was him. I just want leaders, and I want to grow a new generation of leaders. And we don't do that by muzzling them. And we don't do that by saying, just in case there's one person, because you guys may have a legal fear as well. And you may fear that you are going to be put in legal jeopardy if you say, well, we're going to go against the governor, and we're going to go against the CDC. So I just want you to know that we're behind you. And our tax dollars are behind you. And there is nothing that big government is going to do to stop that, because what you do for our kids. So thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay Moore.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As a parent of school-aged children, I am more than concerned that you continue to force unlawful and harmful masks on our children of all ages. The continued jeopardization of the health, education, and safety of our children is my #1 concern and should also be yours. Let me start by saying the masks don't work, and I have the evidence to prove it here. This article from America's Frontline Doctors in June 2020 says that all parties mandating the use of face masks are not only willfully ignoring established science, but are engaging in what amounts to a whole school clinical experimental trial. The conclusion is reached by the fact that face masks use and the COVID-19 incidences are being reported in scientific opinion pieces promoted by the CDC and others. The fact is that after reviewing all of the studies worldwide, the CDC found no reduction in viral transmission with the use of face masks. Second study. This study is from the NCBI under the National Institute of Health that shows that masks do absolutely nothing to help prevent the spread of COVID-19, and their use is even harmful. Have you guys seen the boxes? Have you seen the boxes? Our kids wear these masks. This is a kid's mask. It says, for kids, not for medical use, for civilian use. This mask has not been authorized by the FDA, by the EUA, for use by the HCP as PPE to help prevent the spread of infection or illness in healthcare settings, and by the general public to help slow the spread of the virus during the COVID-19 pandemic. It says it on the box. And then it has a warning label. It says, cancer and reproductive harm. This is what our kids wear. #2, this box. You can get this box at Costco. Okay, y'all have probably seen this box at Costco. It says this product is an ear loop mask. This product is not a respirator and will not provide any protection against the COVID-19 or other viruses or contaminants. Wearing an ear loop mask does not reduce the risk of contracting any disease or infection. Thirdly, why are we making children wear masks when the above 2 statements are true? The governor's mask mandate says mandates are for children 10 and above, and who gives you the authority to approve this illegal mask mandate on our children? The Colorado statute 12-13-129 states you are practicing medicine without a license in the state of Colorado by mandating that our children wear these masks. What you are doing is illegal. You should let the parents choose, not school boards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stacy Adair. All right. Nanette Walker-Smith. No? Kelly Bain. You guys signed up, but you didn't want. Okay. Renee Garza. Sorry. Correct if I'm wrong, please.
It's okay. It's not an easy name. It's Gargas.
Gargas.
And I'm going to break what we're talking about. It's obviously very important, but I feel this is too. Thanks for letting me speak tonight. I have a freshman baseball player at Palmer Ridge High School, and it has come to my attention that our baseball field has some significant drainage issues. The varsity team has had 3 home games scheduled since we began the season May 4th. We haven't been able to play a single game on our field. TCA and Fountain Fort Carson were nice enough to host 2 of our home games for us on their turf fields, and our DCC game had to be rescheduled. Over 50% of our outdoor practices had to be canceled even days after snow and rain due to the poor conditions of the field. This caused the team to either not have practice or spend a lot of money at an indoor facility. Our C team has only had 2 outdoor practices before they started games. The majority of their practice had to be canceled due to lack of gym space and lack of money to go to an indoor facility. Between our 3 teams, only 3 games have been played all season on our Palmer Ridge fields. Lewis Palmer High School played on a night that our field was deemed unplayable. This puts all of our kids at a disadvantage, and I would say at a safety risk for not being prepared. I find that to be unacceptable that in this district and great community that we can't provide a safe, playable field for our baseball teams. I find it embarrassing that other school districts had to host our home games. The district PR and our coaches spend a lot of time and money working on this field constantly, but it does not ultimately fix the problem. My understanding from talking to community members is that the field has been an issue since the school opened. I'm asking for the district and school board to please help address this problem in a timely manner. Please let the baseball organization that they have your support and commitment. Please let stakeholders, coaches, parents, players, and community be involved in the solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Linnea Bottom? Julie, oh, I'm sorry.
You know what? Everything that I wanted to say has been said.
You're good? All right, thank you. Melinda Zark? Thank you. Derek Garahe?
First, I want to thank everybody for coming out. This was put together real quickly, and boy, this is a real great show of support, so give yourselves a big hand. Many parents are concerned that the schools are going further into the medical profession. This is why the MLO didn't pass 2 years ago, because we don't want more mental health in our schools. That's something parents need to take care of with their own children. As it is, 12-year-olds in Colorado can have an abortion and get counseling on a variety of controversial issues without parental consent. The entire vaccine thing just adds one more thing for parents to worry about what their kids are exposed to in our schools. This vaccine being promoted all over the place and is approved for emergency use only. So I have to ask, what's the emergency? There is none for students. So why are we wanting to experiment on them? And why are we making kids have to identify themselves and mark them as the that wear masks? It's just wrong. It seems just the other day I was defending a board member not too long ago that many were calling a Nazi. I'll tell you what, if this masking of unvaccinated students continues, I won't be coming to your defense when they start calling you Nazis again. This is some serious Nazi experimentation that was supposed to end with the Nuremberg trials. Right now, Mengele and Hitler are rolling over in their graves wishing they were alive today to get in on these experiments that the school district seems so eager to support.
Wamba Munguya? I hope I did that right. Close enough?
Today. A lot of the things have already been said by many of the parents that are here, and one of the things that I want for each of you to look ahead on is not just what's happening today, but in the future, because it really troubles me to be able to understand the future unconscious bias that you are putting into the facilitators that are going to be educating our children as they're looking at one kid who's vaccinated, one kid who's not vaccinated. And ever since being in this community, there is another pandemic that I think we all are very familiar with, and it's the suicide rate that's happening in here. And I just feel like this will be another ingredient that adds to that, and I would really like to know how you are going to be treating and also teaching your teachers to be differentiating and not causing another form of stress on our students who are just wanting to learn.
Thank you. Marcia Brower.
Hello.
Hi.
My last child graduated last year. Lousy graduation ceremony with masks until they walked across the stage. I want you to look around here. How many people are wearing them? Most of us don't care. And it's fine if you do and you want to. That's a choice. But when we don't give our students a choice and we force that vaccine on them so they can unmask, you know, what has happened with people with vaccines? Over 5,000 deaths since this vaccine has been initiated. Women have been losing babies. Fertility is in question now. I want to be a grandparent someday. These guys probably do too. So you need to really, really look at all this stuff before you're pushing that vaccine on everybody. And the mask, look, Mr. Ebersol and Mr. Chapman came up here and they were masked and then they took it off. Well, their stuff is in the room now. But the children had to play their instruments with masks on. That's ridiculous. I am a homeschool band director. We never masked up one time this entire year. We missed 2 weeks because somebody came down with it who was sick. Guess who wore the mask? That family was a mask wearer. I'm just saying, it doesn't make sense. Do not put our children in jeopardy. Do not put their grandchildren in jeopardy. My children are all adults now, so you're not going to hurt them, but you may hurt their children. So think and research before you agree to this.
Thank you. Amy McKenzie. I'm sorry, is this Mary Harrow?
Dr. Mary Harrow, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So my name's Dr. Mary Harrow, thank you. I come for the concerned citizens of our state, unfortunately. I was ready to talk about masks, but then I got that email about the vaccines for children. So we don't call them vaccines in the medical profession just yet because they haven't been authorized to be vaccines. They're not conferring immunity. We do have, as she spoke on the VAERS site, we've got over 4,000 deaths so far, 150,000 adverse events. So I just want to talk for a minute about the vaccine. So the makers are immune, as you know, from 1986. So you can make a vaccine these days and not have any liability. But you all will be liable based on OSHA and some of the other laws. So just make sure that you protect yourselves. The CDC has 600 lawsuits against it right now. 600. And we have international lawsuits as well. 3/4 of these makers have been sued and brought to market, even when they knew that there was going to be injuries and deaths. The past 20 years for messenger RNA, all the animal models have died. What does that tell you about what's happening to the population? All of the animal models have died. Do you understand that? That's autoimmune disease. That's end organ failure. ICU nurse today in the office. I said, what's the stats? She said, 23, 2 traumas, 21 post-vaccine COVID cases. So it's not conferring immunity. It will not protect these children. This is an experiment. There's a documentary right now where you can put a magnet on the side of your body and it sticks there where you've had the jab. What's that? So we know there's 1,300 milligrams of aluminum, but aluminum's not magnetic. We know there's PEG, polysorbate beta. Anyway, the emergency use authorization is not FDA approved. We know the FDA looked blindly. We have treatments for COVID, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, budesonide, inhaled hydrogen peroxide. So I've not lost any patients. I've treated a ton of them. They've come gray to my office because their doctors refused or were too ignorant to know that there's a treatment. So the FDA is not allowed to approve the manufacturing of a vaccine if we have treatments. So the FDA did this. So who's the FDA working for now? And then the Federal Trade Commission also did this because you're not allowed to call this a vaccine if it doesn't confer immunity. So there's crimes going on in our federal government, and we as locals, this is the only place we can start and gain our power back. There's no informed consent. Has anybody had a vaccine and they sit down and show you, oh, here's everything that's in it, here are all the people who've died, here's what's possible for you? You don't see anybody. They're driving up in their cars, rolling their windows down and going, yeah, give it to me. Well, that's not how we work in medicine. Informed consent's like one of the foundations of our code of ethics. The CDC, the ethics violations are going to be enormous. Most hospitalizations, as today, are from people. COVID death numbers have been manipulated. PCR test was also manipulated. We have 31,000 deaths in the United States due to COVID. Not this 300,000, 600,000. I've heard numbers all over the place. It's 31,000 when you've corrected for the PCR test without comorbidities. None of the children are dying. So this is an infection rate for children is 0.001%, which means you put 2 more zeros on the right. So that means that 1 child out of 100,000 will die. And that's in your age group. This is 5 to 14. So your kids don't have an infection rate. They don't have a risk. The asymptomatic that we heard about, that's a healthy person. The asymptomatic was blown out of the water with a study that was done with 9 million people. I know she's looking at you. Are you watching your clock? The mask is a medical device. I should only be prescribing that for certain people, and that's all I do. As you know, it won't protect you. Censorship in the absence of scientific debate should be made the question only heard from one doctor all year. You only heard from one person. You didn't hear any other doctors. They were all scrubbed. How is that America? One doctor spoke all year. And we know that we had herd immunity by April of last year. We know that this virus travels. We know that it was manipulated. And I'm happy to share any of my data I have found from all the medical literature to help educate you to make a decision that's best for the children. Because who's going to speak up for them?
Thank you. I'm sorry? I was just going to say, we've got about 6 more minutes, so she used more time than, and it was fine because I wanted to hear all of it, but we got 6 minutes, and I have, Amy, did you want to still speak, or was that, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more. So if you want to take a minute apiece, I'm happy to hear you. This is Melinda Zark.
Last week, Senator Burr from North Carolina held some kind of hearings. And he had Dr. Fauci, he had FDA's Director of the Center for Biologics and Evaluation and Research, Peter Marks, and he had the CDC Director there. And he asked them a question they weren't prepared for. He said, what percentage of the employees in your institute, center, or agency has been vaccinated? Dr. Fauci took forever to take his mask off as he tried to figure out how he's going to answer. And he said, well, you know, I don't really know. I'm not 100% sure, Senator, but I think it's probably a little bit more than half, probably around 60%. This is Dr. Fauci's employees at his agency. The FDA director said, I can't tell you the exact number, but it's probably in the same range. So the FDA that has authorized these vaccines for emergency use, their own employees are not getting these vaccines. The CDC director dissembled and just said, well, we're encouraging them, but because the federal government is not requiring it, we just don't know. Why do you expect us to accept how seriously you are taking everything that Denver tells you in these emails? I don't understand this. Vaccines protect the vaccinated. Anyone who is afraid of this virus could have been vaccinated months ago. And anyone who is afraid of their kids getting it and what's going to happen is irrational. That's what the science says. You're catering to an irrational fear. But lastly, for families with immunocompromised people in them, these masks, it's wrong. It's wrong for anyone to be comforting them and making them think that these masks are protecting their compromised family members. Their kids are bringing it home. Thanks.
Thank you. We will be done at 7, so.
Can I steal this real quick? Okay, so I have a couple of examples of the masks and what they say on the back for you guys to look with the warnings. Somebody already mentioned that if you want to pass it down. But I also have the sheet here. It has the information from Moderna, Pfizer, and the Johnson & Johnson information, and they all say there is no U.S. Food and Drug Administration FDA-approved vaccine to prevent COVID-19. And if you want to pass those down, please, to each board member. Thank you. I can. Thank you. So the Texas Senate House Committee had a hearing on state affairs May 6, 2021. The evidence is clear that VAERS grossly underestimates adverse reactions. And it was also stated that animal test was started and stopped because the animals were dying, and American people are now the guinea pigs. This is the test program with these vaccines. And the FDA also says vaccines are not mandated. So this new policy you have about only vaccinated students ages 16 to 18 can unmask is discrimination. It is coercion to comply. Medical decisions should be the decisions of the families, period. And Dr. Summers stated in November of 2020 that it really boils down to what is in the appetite within our community. It's a local school district by school district approach at this time. We're asking you to please take into consideration what the local community wants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more people. There's one person that has something other than mask, and I'm just going to call on them. It's Amy Savage. Okay. I don't.
I will. All right. Hi. Good evening. Thank you so much for keeping our students safe this year. We appreciate you. But I'm here about something different than masks, sorry. I don't know if that's allowed, but I would like to say that I want to say thank you for really paying attention to your goal of creating a safe and healthy and welcoming environment for our students. Part of that is diversity, equity, and inclusion training that you have invested in. And it's a beginning, and I'm grateful, and we have a lot more distance to travel on that. So just really want to say thank you. And to the community members who have opposed diversity, equity, and inclusion training, I'm a little bit scratching my head about that. We have a lot of diverse students in this community. I have a Black son in this community. I have a kid on an IEP in this community. I have a kid in the LGBTQ+ community in this school. And I would encourage you that if you could walk a moment in their shoes in this school district, and you could feel the pain and you could feel the hiding that they have to do here, you might change your mind about supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion. The fact that we're fighting against our kids having a sense of belonging, I can't wrap my mind around, and I really want you to hear I support this 100%, and there are many other people in this district who do. Our kids' lives, speaking of the suicide rate, which I appreciate you mentioning, depend on this.
Thank you, Amy. What was your name?
Mr. Ryan Campbell. I did send an email to Ms. Wu.
Okay, well, I wasn't on the list, so. Hold on, I'm sorry. Our 30 minutes are up, and if I'm going to give you time, I have to give 4 or 5 more people.
I would very much appreciate it. Extend it. I promise I'll be.
I'm sorry?
This is important.
Well, I'd asked about the email, and you said there were none. Well, if I'm going to allow him, I have to allow 4 others, because we're over time. So, 2 minutes apiece. I'm going to allow everyone that signed up.
Thank you.
That saves 5 minutes right there.
Dr. Summers, honorable board members, D38 community. My name is Mr. Ryan Campbell, and I have the pleasure of teaching French at Palmer Ridge High School to some of the absolute best students in the whole country. Thank you. Tonight, I'm here to briefly speak on the status of staff compensation in D38. We would first like to thank you for all your hard work in navigating our district through the arduous COVID-19 period. In particular, we appreciate your work to ensure that there are absolutely no layoffs among staffs. It did not go unnoticed. On May 12, 2021, Dr. Summers wrote in the Tribune that our teachers and staff deserve the recognition and thanks deserved last week. They deserve so much more. These dedicated individuals make a difference daily in the lives of our children, our community, and our future. While we appreciate these words, as well as the $1,000 bonus allocated in November of 2020, we contend that neither it nor the proposed raised salary schedule steps currently under proposal does justice to our endeavor over this past years and our value as educators. Many of us found our workloads effectively doubled due to the novel nature of teaching, both in person and synchronously, dealing with quarantines, and above all, putting our own health at risk to teach in person before any of us had been vaccinated. We would politely ask you to adjust the current budget to increase the salaries of every district worker under $80,000 by 10%. Please consider the cost of living in the Monument area is $56,238. On the license salary schedule, no one with a bachelor's degree plus 15 will ever reach that salary. In the bachelor's plus 30, reaching this cost of living comes at step 18. And the inequity is even far more serious on the classified scale, naturally.
I'm sorry, but that's
we contend that this is not remotely fair nor sustainable. I promise. I'll wrap it up soon.
No. We're going to wrap it up. I'm sorry. I'm going to hold everyone to the clock, and I apologize, but I'm already given an extension here. So the next speaker is Stephen Walsh. Two minutes.
2 minutes. I won't even need 2 minutes. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you for all the community members for being here. Last meeting we talked about, we had to hear about bad decisions being made because we were being given bad data, okay? We're still being given bad data, and I feel like we're still making bad decisions. Great steps on getting the kids in the elementary schools to take their masks off. Not 11 and above still wearing them, okay? So pretty much everything I wanted to say has already been addressed by other community members. One thing I do want to do is say it's got to be parents' choice on every single thing. So, and those that want to go out and get this jab in their arm, I would encourage you to do research with your life insurance company. I can speak firsthand because I did due diligence, and I asked, if I take this, will you pay out if I have an adverse reaction? And they said, no, it is an experimental treatment. It is not FDA approved. If you die, we will not pay your life insurance policy. That's for something to keep in mind for people that want to go out and get the jab. I will give you your time back. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Miranda Willoughby. Miranda Willoughby. We're good? Thank you. Jeff Hall.
Thank you, sir, for extending the time.
It's very, very important that you did that, and that was a good decision. My name is Jeff Hall, and I'm from D39, and I am one of the principals of a multi-coalition of numerous districts across the state who are fighting CRT, white privilege, white supremacy, diversity, equity, and inclusion. What I found when I discovered that District 49 was about to teach white supremacy and white privilege to the teachers, and the teachers are going to bring that back to the students, was that there was absolutely positively no parents that were aware that this was going to happen. So that automatically spun me up, because I'm a parent too. So I said, no way. So I began fighting this myself, and I made good progress. I had a couple of people helping me with Jim back here and Lisa, and because I had people behind me, parents, and you've got to get involved. If you don't get involved, nothing's going to happen. We had the board president that mandated that CRT would not be taught in District 49 as long as he is the president of District 49, and that is only because the parents got involved. So what happened here? There was absolutely positively zero critical thinking about CRT, white supremacy, white privilege, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They did not explore other avenues. They took it upon themselves to make the decision to fight this, to do this themselves, without asking about what else could be done. And it's the wrong thing to do. You've got to ask questions, you've got to have dissenting opinions, so you come to a middle-of-the-road decision and something that is good for the kids. If it's not good for the kids, you'd better not do it.
Thank you, Jeff. Good. Time's up. And last but not least is Michael O'Hare. 2 minutes.
I'll make it quick.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for letting us speak today. And I would like to say, I think I'm going to change my doctor. Very good. First, I'd like to start off and just say I'd like to follow the science. I did bring the Stanford study that shows that the face masks are pretty much useless. And what I'd like to say is just take a minute and look around the room and look at your neighbor. And what do you notice? What do you see? I see bright, warm, smiling, happy faces. And this is what God intended us to be. And our children deserve no less. No less. That's right. So please, and I'm so glad all of you came out and spoke your mind. And please tell your children, because today you stood up, all right? And you said, no, we're not going to do this. And this is really, really great. And I'm so happy to see you. So please go home and pat yourself on your back and hug your kids. Yes, you can hug and kiss your kids too, without a mask. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. You guys ready for a break, or would you like to just jump right into board member comments? Let's do a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 7:15. Thank you all for participation tonight. What's your name? Oh, I have you here and I checked you off. I so apologize. I really am sorry. I absolutely didn't. You know I didn't do it intentionally. Item is board member comments. And I was going to start with Matt. So when he comes in, everybody be really quiet. All right, so board member comments is next. I'd like to start with Matt and then just work right on up the row here.
All right, first of all, I wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight. I especially appreciated your comments. I have 3 kids that wear masks every day that they're in Palmer Ridge. And as one board member, I'm committed to see what we could do to work through this challenge and hopefully reaching a consensus that's in the best interest of our kids. Want to once again recognize Dr. Benton. We're going to miss you. You've done an incredible job and 22 plus years serving our kids. Thank you. Also want to congratulate Palmer Ridge girls volleyball team. They won state. I had the privilege of watching a few of their games, and they're well coached and very tenacious. And so congratulations to them. And hopefully at one of the upcoming board meetings, we'll be able to recognize them as well. And as we approach the finish line for the end of the school years, want to thank our teachers and all of our staff and team members for the great year that they've done. For the time that I've been on the board, I think this past school year has been perhaps the most challenging I've experienced, and I know it's worn on everyone. I look at Dr. Summers over there. First time I've seen him without a mask in about a year, and looks like he's aged a couple years. So that's all I have, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Matt. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Am I on? Yeah, I'm on. Thank you, Mr. Clausen. So I wanted to echo his comments and thank all the community members for caring and taking the time to come and for presenting logical, research-based arguments. So thank you for doing that. Secondly, also, congratulations to Dr. Benton. We'll miss you. 22 years is a long time. The board was 6 when you started. What I wanted to do on my comments is just take a half step back and reflect on the year a little bit. And typically, for the last 18 months or so, I attempt to use this comment time to really focus on the unrecognized art of the daily magic that happens in our K-12 education system. There's so many good things that are happening every day. But if you'll indulge me this evening, I want to take a moment, just focus on the macro and some of the magic that's occurred, and particularly in light of the fact that the end of the school year is scheduled for very, very shortly here. When the year began, we were one of the few places that stepped up and brought our kids back. We kind of took the legal authority that we had, which is limited to as far as we could. We made some calculated choices, and we wound up with the following. We had some degree of angst, some controversy, and some unknown. But at least the students and parents had some choice. We probably had more in-person student-to-teacher contact than most of the country. And from everything I've read, and likely you've read as well, that matters. We had sports, prom, and soon-to-be graduation. So to the district-facing staff who really dug in, made all this work, and they made lemonade out of lemons, I think it's important that we acknowledge you and that we thank you. For most of the teams, this would be enough, and we'd pat ourselves on the back, and we'd be thankful, and we'd declare victory and move on. But not in this district. While all this was happening, in addition to the amazing pivots that the staff made to and from remote and in-person learning and back again, this team also did a couple neat things that are going to make a major difference, as one citizen said, looking to the future. One is they embarked on a complex but necessary strategic plan that's in motion, underway, and being executed on. We put cash back in the shareholders' pockets in the form of a bond refinancing. We vetted, built, and began a lasting literacy program that is going to reverse a national trend of K through 5 kids reducing their capacity to read a grade level. We distributed over 1,800 new computing devices and hundreds of hotspots so that those that chose to work and learn remotely could. We moved through a transparent plan to evaluate and act on Grace Best, which has been a bit of a thorn in the district's side for years and years and years. And we're about to close in on an energy management contract that accelerates decades of deferred maintenance in our facilities and enhances our green posture for at least 2 decades. And we build a first ever asset list so the stakeholders can really understand what we have and what tools we have to work with going forward, students and staff. So as I said before, this kind of fortitude in action and results are what will continue to separate us from our peers. And Dr. Summers, congratulations to the team for not allowing the pandemic and all of its challenges to derail the mission of the districts and the students and the staff and the families it serves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Well said. Tiffany?
Mr. Schwartz, that's where to follow, because you summarized this year very astutely. I'm going to show a picture real quick because I think this is a cool picture, and I know not all of you can see it, but I'm going to show it anyway. This picture, do you see these students right here? This is our volleyball team that just won state. Do you see how happy they are? Our district is not going to rest on its laurels, and we are advocating for our kids. I personally have advocated for our kids. I personally have advocated and talked to many of you parents, and I will continue to talk to many of you parents. I have personally talked to attorneys, to our state health department, to our county health department, to our county commissioners, to our state legislatures. This energy is what is needed to advocate for our children. And we're not going to stop advocating for our children. Dr. Summers and your team, you have navigated so much confusion over this school year. And I appreciate that. I applaud that. So thank you so much. Also, I want to applaud our students. All of us board members on this sitting here, each of us have children in the school district that are attending school now and have attended school with those of you that have children in our school district. My children, Matt's children, Teresa's children, Chris's children, our children sit next to your children every day. So we are living this, and we as parents are going through this as well. And another board member has children that are teaching as well. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for advocating, and thank you for practicing your First Amendment rights to stick up for your children and advocate for your children, because that's what's most important. You as parents have the freedom to make your choices for your students. I'm not under the impression that we as a school district are going to mandate vaccines on anybody's children, but Dr. Summers can clarify that, but I'm pretty sure that that's not what we're going to do. I would stand up against that. As a parent, that would not be okay with me. I have children that are about to graduate and go off to college. They do have to have their vaccines if they want to be a person in their colleges. That's their choices as an adult. That's their choices as an adult. I also want to make sure that some of our students that are wearing masks wear masks out of choice. Some don't want to wear masks. So no matter what happens going forward, I would ask that students and adults alike respect the freedom and the rights of everybody to make that choice for themselves, including some of our band member students that they did outstanding performance tonight. I personally know some of those students, and I personally know that those students are making the choices that they want to. I don't think that we should be using them as a tool one way or another. Our children we do not use our children, should not use our children to push an agenda. I also want to say that I want to congratulate our class of 2021. These students have been through so much this year, and they will someday hopefully look back and no doubt reflect on the journey and their resilience. 30 years ago, I'm dating myself, 30 years ago, I graduated with the class of don't want our kids to have to go through, but they do. And they will look back. And I don't want my kids in masks. I'm sorry I'm in lecture, but I don't want my kids in masks any more than any of you. I have heard Dr. Summers time and time again say over and over again, if we can get our kids back in the classroom, we should. And we did. We have done better, I think, personally, and I'm proud of our school district. I think we've done better than most of our neighbors. Can we do better? You bet you we can, and we should not rest on our laurels. But I'm proud of the work that we have done. So thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Teresa?
Yeah, I thank you, fellow board members, for your comments so far, and I don't want to repeat anything that's already been said, so I'm just going to add a few things that as board members we were invited during Teacher Appreciation Week to attend breakfasts and lunches at all of the school sites, including transitions and a homeschool enrichment program. And I just, first of all, I wanted to thank you, Dr. Summers, for putting those invitations out to all of us, and to say that after having not been in the school sites for the better part of the school year, it was a pleasure to interact with our teachers. And what I came away with after last week was the great appreciation they have for all the in-person time that they had with their students, especially at our elementary level, which has been open since August 17th. And so, and we can't possibly interact as much with teachers and staff as we would like to, so I just want to publicly say for all of those that we didn't get a chance to personally interact with, that I can only speak as one board member, but safely speak as for the board, how grateful we are to all of our teachers. And I was also really thankful that we had a chance to recognize our school nurses this evening as well, because I know they took on quite a workload. I also wanted, at the last meeting, I neglected to mention the theater productions that were done by both high schools this year under conditions that were what I would think would be really, really challenging. And they did amazing work, and they were wonderful productions. So I just wanted to applaud our high schoolers, even though they're not here in person, but recognize all the efforts that are going into some of those activities and classes that we might not be aware of, but those teachers and those students were still working within, the confines of the situation, but also doing the things that they're really passionate about. And those are the things that really have kept our school communities going and in such a thriving way. I also want to just thank all the efforts that are going into our graduations that are coming up next week. And I'm grateful to my fellow board members for the continued work. I'm not going to repeat everything that Mr. Schwartz said, but I am looking forward to the Grace Best Facility Master Plan options and having that discussion, as well as the Schneider Electric work that's going forward this next month in June. So thank you, everybody, for your time and efforts.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, fellow board members. I concur with everything I've heard, and I appreciate it. It almost leaves me with nothing to say, except I made a mistake earlier, and I left off one person who was here for public comments, and it was my mistake. And so I'm going to give up 2 minutes of my board member comments right now to Amy Davis. See if one of those mics will work. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll just sit. My name is Amy Davis. I have a first grader and a third grader boy in District 38. I just wanted to touch on 2 areas here. I spoke with a pediatrician a couple of weeks ago, and she shared with me that she has prescribed more Prozac, Zoloft, and ADHD medication in the last 6 months than she has in her entire 13 years of practicing medicine. Let's see here. One of the pediatrician's most recent suicidal patients, a 14-year-old, said, "It's not that I don't want to live, I just don't want to live like this anymore." District 38 Board, I ask you to fight for our children as we continue to isolate our children from their peers, force them to cover their faces, and risk the unknown side effects from a brand new vaccine. We are raising a generation of children steeped in anxiety, depression, and poor self-esteem. We can do better. It's time to say enough is enough and fight for our children, our schools, and our community members. There is a better way ahead that does not involve leaving our children broken, academically behind, and without a sense of control over their futures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have a thought I want to share, and that is my two grandmothers both came from Denmark in the early 1900s as legal immigrants. And they came here very poor, but they came to a land of opportunity. Now, there are similar stories throughout this land of Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans, Brazilian Americans, African Americans, Danish, oh, I already said Danish, sorry, etc. The point being is we all came from somewhere, and we are one people. This is the United States of America. And in fact, when I hear the term white privilege, I immediately think, no, it's really American privilege. Right. People who live in America are privileged, not to the exclusion of one another, to the exclusion of the rest of the world. We are a privileged people. We need to act together to solve problems. I loved the voices I heard tonight. I hope that people will get involved in our goals for this school district. Goal number 1, safe environment. The safe environment applies to, equity or equality and those things of that nature. We want to hear your voices. We want, our roles are to reflect our community, help oversee and govern the school district. Conversely, we understand what the school district is doing, and we want to be a voice to help champion good things. It's really important. It's really important that we avoid things that are divisive. It doesn't do anyone any good. And I'm not saying not speak your mind. I'm not saying state your case. I'm not saying don't articulate a good idea or a bad idea or whatever it is. The point being is we should be very open. We should seek to understand one another. And then try and understand, well then, given our commonality, what's the best path forward? And we can find these things. It isn't impossible. It just takes each one of us to consider from whence we're speaking and where are you at? Where your perspective is as important to me as my own. Not all of you, in fact, I suspect very few of you have two grandmothers that came from Denmark. So that makes me unique. I have two older siblings, older brother and an older sister. I was born on their birthday. That makes me unique. But what has that got to do with this? What it has to do with is that as board members, we worked really hard with the school district. This school district administration, including principals, worked really hard to put together, I call them big rocks, but it's the goals. And then we dove deep into those goals. And we want the community to understand and appreciate and participate. Now, I think the Grace Best example was a good example of how the school district is trying to collaborate with the community to make good, informed decisions that reflect our values. So I'm going to just close with this. I have loved the opportunity to serve on this school board. I have appreciated getting to know people on a one-on-one basis and to hear their voices. I've appreciated being able to observe the administration, the teachers, the entire staff, their unequaled effort to take care of our children. And I also know that it's not perfect. There's room for improvement. And I loved that I think each one of you said, we're not resting on our laurels. We want to have continuous improvement. So with that, I'm just going to end this way. Beyond this service that I'm doing, I do another bit of service with people that suffer from addiction. And one of the worst triggers, if you will, of addiction is isolation. And I have felt during this past 15 months, periods of time, that I felt very isolated. I personally struggled with that isolation. I don't think any of us like it. Do you know how happy I am to not wear a mask tonight? I mean, you know, I'm just saying, nobody chose this last 15 months. And I read and I understand that, you know, there's all sorts of reasons behind everything. But 15 months ago, we were told that we could all die. That's how it started. Now we've learned over time, a very short period of time, well, we're not going to all die. I am a COVID survivor. I'm not the only one on this board that's a COVID survivor. But it hurt. I had 4 weeks of fatigue that was unlike I've ever felt. I have known people who have died. So it wasn't make-believe, it was real. And I just have to say, we had no crystal ball. We didn't have the data that I hear about today 15 months ago. So again, Dr. Summers, I just want you, the teachers, the principals, everyone who works in our school district to know that I believe our community appreciates that we had elementary school all year. And we've done the very best, we, meaning you, have done the very best to keep kids in contact. You know, it really is about the individual child. My wife was a teacher, and why she loved teaching wasn't because of a class of 26. It was because of 26 individuals that she got to know on a very personal level. And today I'll be in a grocery store and somebody that I don't know runs up and gives her a hug and says, "Mrs. Taylor, how are you?" What a wonderful thing that is. And I can just imagine how many more teachers experience similar things. And I love that. So, you know, at its core, our opportunity in this country needs good education. We need hard work and we need good character. And that's what the school system can help parents achieve. And I'll leave that with that. And Dr. Summers, Superintendent update.
Well, wasn't exactly sure where we would be time-wise coming into this update. So because you've done all such a fantastic job of touching on just about everything that I had on my list, I'm going to keep this very brief, but I do want to just reiterate and echo from an appreciation and a place of gratitude. Ms. Phillips, you mentioned the opportunity that we had to go to our Teacher Appreciation Week events, breakfast and lunch. I know that was very well received. So thank you all for your efforts, not only in that endeavor, but really throughout the course of this year. This is a volunteer post. This is about service before self. You all are spending endless hours and countless times trying to absorb everything that we can digest and make sense of it as best we can. And what I appreciate, and I think it speaks to the fact, like many of these comments that we've heard tonight, there is absolutely frustration. There is absolutely passion for how we're going to work our way through this. But one of the things that I think is important, I just want to touch on this really briefly. I have the fortunate opportunity to be in and around and amongst the best students, the best staff, and quite honestly, a community that I know deep down, we may not agree on every part of what we're going to do, but we care about what happens to each and every one of our students, and we care about their future. And understandably, there is a lot of energy right now, and I feel like pointing the energy at a system, at a local board and district level is absolutely appropriate. There are also things that are limited within our control. I would love to tell you that we have the ability to just shun and not pay attention to anything that comes our way at the state level. But the reality is, in government, and we are a government system, we do have to adhere to what the guidelines or the regulations are. I can go on record and tell you there is no mention at all that I'm aware of, I don't think it's going to come, that's going to try to mandate a vaccine. We're certainly not going to take a position to mandate a vaccine for anybody. For our students, I can tell you with our staff, we can't do that, right? What we are trying to do is navigate the complex environment that we are currently in. I appreciate that you want to see more efforts on behalf of what we can do to stand up And I will tell you, there will be opportunities as we go through this summer where we can do exactly that. I won't go into all those details right now, but I can tell you in a recent superintendent meeting, we're all feeling that same frustration. We're all exhausted with this. And we're just looking at each other and saying, how can we leverage or how can we advocate for what's best on behalf of each and every one of our students? We will continue to do that. I can't tell you that it's always listened to or it's always going to be acted upon, but do I believe that we can make progress in that effort? Absolutely. I have to believe that. Otherwise, then it makes you think that you're not really fighting for anything where you can get anywhere. That all being said, I know we still have other items that we're going to dive into here. So I think, I want to say this. That was the one thing that was lingering for me. We have 4 more days of the school year. 4 more days with our students.
3 in a flex Friday.
That's fair. Depends on your grade level. We have 6th grade continuations that are coming up. I know some schools do kindergarten recognition. We have an 8th grade continuation ceremony. We have graduation that's right around the corner. We have teachers and staff. I would love to be able to bring every single one of our staff members into this room and give them the recognition and the appreciation that they so deserve. I value, we are all doing our part here, but every single time I think about how hard it is, if you go and spend just a little bit of time with a teacher or ask our kids what they're feeling and how they're making sense of all of this, the honor and the recognition truly goes to how they have persevered, continue to show up, continue to push ahead. I hope that everybody has an opportunity this summer to just step away, recharge, reflect, because we're going to come back in next year. And the fact that we've gone through, Mr. Clausen, to your point, probably the most challenging year that we've had, we're going to come stronger. We're going to be stronger as we go through this, and we're going to be that much better on the other end. And I don't want that to just sound optimistic and pep talk, but the reality is it takes all of us continuing to invest our time, our talent, our treasure into what's going to make our school system be everything that it can be on behalf of every student every day. So again, Mr. Taylor, with that, I appreciate the floor and the opportunity to continue to serve in this role.
Thank you, Dr. Summers. We appreciate you. The next item is D1. Consider approve contract for new Chief Human Resources Officer. I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract of Kristen Stuber, Chief Human Resources Officer, to begin on July 1, 2021.
I'll second that motion.
Any comments or concerns? Should we have the introduction and then vote at the end?
Please.
So thank you, Mr. Taylor, and as we're in a little bit of transition here, Ms. Stever, if you could please join us closer near the front here.
Thank you all.
Have a good evening. So, Board, it is my privilege and honor to introduce to you and formally recommend Ms. Kristen Steber as our incoming and new Chief Human Resources Officer. So I can just speak a little bit briefly to Ms. Steber's experience. She started her career as a special educator, I believe in New York State. Had several years of service both in New York, I believe some time in Hawaii, and some time in Georgia. And she had the opportunity to move into the human resources aspect of school operations back, I want to say 16 years ago. Does that sound right? That's a lot of years. A lot of years in HR. Ms. Sieber is going to bring a real strong focus on how we're continuing to leverage support and strategic alignment with the goals that we have as part of our strategic plan, specifically around how we support every one of our employees and being part of a dynamic team. So we're very fortunate to be able to bring her to the District 38 team and very privileged to be able to introduce her to you this evening. So Ms. Steber, do you want to say just a few words?
I just want to say thank you. I'm really looking forward to working with each of you, and it's a great opportunity. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? Anyone? Ms. Wood, would you call the roll?
Aye.
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 Welcome.
Thank you.
We look forward to working with you as well.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
And I know Ms. Steber has a very early flight that she has to get ready to leave to be ready for that. So have a good evening, Ms. Steber. Safe travels. and we'll see you around.
Our next board item is D2, Grace Best Facility Master Plan. Kurt Conley from Answer Advisory and Kevin Huber from Cooperative Strategies are presenting, it says here, a final report and recommendations.
Before we start, if I may, I have a student in Jefferson County Schools for 3 more days while finals. Man, after that last hour, I certainly wish he would have attended here. Is that okay to say, Dr. Summers?
Absolutely. We have room in choice enrollment as well, Mr. Connolly.
Understood. If it wasn't 40 miles away, I'd consider it.
Thank you all for having us tonight. I also have Susan Miller on the phone. You want to go ahead and talk real quick, Susan?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Sorry I can't be there this evening. I am picking up my son from St. Louis University, bringing him back home. So my apologies. It was kind of a last-minute switch.
We can hear you loud and clear, so that's good.
Thank you. Okay.
Susan helped lead this process along with the district, Kurt and I. And we have our final recommendation from the steering committee to present to you guys tonight. At the last work session, you guys requested that we go back and interview the steering committee and look at kind of cost-benefit analysis for each of the items, the options that we looked at. And so, take you guys through this presentation. We held our last steering committee meeting a week ago, about the same time with them. And again, just appreciate the passion in this district and everybody involved with this process. So tonight we're going to take a look at where we are and the options and recommendations. As you can see from our little timeline, we are on the very last meeting. Hopefully not the last time we're up here in front of you guys, but we will see. So when we take a look at this, it is a two-phased approach, and we were tasked with completing phase 1, which was facility master plan for Grace Best. Phase 2 will be taking action on the option that the board decides upon based off our findings with the steering committee. At every meeting, we took a look at our guiding principles to remind everybody of what the focus of this was. I'm not going to reread all of these. I'll just highlight the top portions. Promoting equity, creating a process that is data-driven towards the vision of the district, community engagement at each step, transparency throughout the process, and making sure that all options are a trade-up scenario for the students of Lewis Palmer 38. Again, just kind of showing the timeline, we established the committee, looked at the data and background information, collected additional community feedback through a survey, developed the options, and then finalized recommendations, what we're going to discuss tonight. Right here, the steering committee reviewed data, strategic goals, and community survey results. We wanted to make sure this aligned with the district's strategic plan. As you can see, we have educational purpose. This is a data-driven decision, perceived need versus what the data may show, enrollment, capacity, utilization. We discuss CTE, what purpose, complement to the current programs, flex spaces, innovation space, and then future-proof to ensure longevity of use. We also wanted to ensure this was an effective asset management and efficient use of resources as aligned with the strategic plan as well. So just to give you a review of the process, we had 5 steering committee meetings with over 30 participants at each. Each meeting ran roughly two plus hours. We had 570 respondents to our survey, which we have discussed with you previously. We were really excited to have that many respondents for this single facility master plan. We had 2 community dialogue events with approximately 80 participants. And our outreach efforts included newspaper advertisement, Peach Jar flyers, direct email to Lewis Palmer families and staff, social media, and then also individual steering committee members reaching out to their neighbors and friends however they could. Transparency of process. Hopefully everybody's aware of the website. We've been posting all of the recorded meetings and survey information and data on that website. We've had over 1,000 visits over the last 5 months, and all presentations are available on there as well. This shows what the cost would be for each option. So through this process, we came out with 5 options. Demo the entire building, upgrade just to code compliance, that's new systems with no furniture, fixtures, or equipment. We also looked at doing a full remodel of the building, new systems, new finishes, and furniture, tech upgrades. We looked at demoing a portion of the building, roughly 50%, and renovating 50% of it, and then a full building replacement. And you can see those costs vary a lot, from $1.4 million all the way up to $28.4 million. When we looked at the ranking and recommendations of the options of the steering committee, 15 committee members chose as their number 1 option to demo a portion and remodel a portion of the facility, with another 3 choosing that as their second option. So for tonight's discussion, because we had so few on the demo and code option, we're just going to be looking at the comments for full remodel, demo, and full replacement. So first we have the full remodel of the facility. So this is when we went back to the committee last week to identify these, looking at the benefits to students, teachers, taxpayers, community, highlighting any other benefits, and then also noting challenges with each of these items. So benefits to a full remodel of the facility for students was improved learning environment, opportunity for improved safety features, and to meet ADA requirements, ability to provide vocational training for special needs students transitioning out of the school system, such as a commercial kitchen. Benefits for teachers is an improved learning environment, opportunity for improved safety features and ADA. Benefits for taxpayers' community would make this accessible to the community, active management of the property, which is positive for taxpayers. Other benefits, Grace Best will still be a part of the community history, a long history of that facility with the community. Challenges with this are costs, constraints from existing infrastructure, where would we put students while remodeling is happening, and funding, consideration of grant dollars. We know there are grant opportunities out there, and we could discuss those with you. Some of them are very competitive, and we may or may not qualify for some of those grants as well. We also looked at a full building replacement, and I'll just try and go through these quick. Benefits to students, comprehensive school facility, better learning environment, improved safety features, ADA upgrades, ability to provide vocational training for special needs students transitioning out of the school system, such as a commercial kitchen, teachers, a better environment to teach in, more rooms for innovative programs, and ways to bring in CTE options. Benefits for the taxpayers and community, active management of property, which is positive for taxpayers, visible use of taxpayer dollars, accessible to community, all options, could provide the ability to provide vocational training for special needs students, as we've mentioned before. Commercial kitchen can accomplish this with the least expensive option, and we need to respect the community's desire for cost effectiveness. Other benefits, it's visionary. What does Monument look like 50 years from now rather than 3 years? Modern LEED building, flexibility of space for future use, adaptive, and long run save money for the district. Our challenges here were costs, consideration of grant dollars, pressure to find a new location, temporary student housing, potential pushback from taxpayers as this is the most expensive option, and potential of lack of support for this option being the most expensive. Last, we look at, I just want to highlight this one. When we say demo half the building, renovate half of it, we're talking about demolishing the 1959 portion, which is on the west side of the building, and the old locker rooms behind the gym. That 59 portion of the building has cinder block walls. Definitely hard to reconfigure those spaces and update some of the systems in those areas. So it's coming out to roughly 32,000 square feet of demolition. And then we would look at remodeling the 1988 two-story portion of the building and the gym that is currently being used by the home school program, Barebotics, and the Transitions program. So benefits to students with this option: less of a disruption to the students using the space for less amount of time. Remodel could eliminate some of the limitations currently in that space. Opportunity for safety feature upgrades, ADA requirements, ability to provide vocational training for special needs students transitioning out of the school system, such as a commercial kitchen. Benefits for teachers: benefit to step back and evaluate what they need to make space viable for delivery of programming. Creative thinking to design opportunity for improved safety features and meet ADA requirements. Benefits for the taxpayers and community: it would be accessible to the community, lowest cost for minimal program changes, opportunity for improved safety features and ADA, active management of the property, which is positive for taxpayers, and we need to respect the community's desire for cost effectiveness. Other benefits: flexible option for future use, providing programming concepts with lowest incremental costs, lends itself to stage rollout for 3 programs and additional programs. Opportunity for improved safety and ADA is noted, historic value, and as we move programs from other buildings, could allow for more room for other schools to leverage core classes. Challenges with this one, as all, were costs, but the lowest cost option. Funding may be more doable. What might be unexpected: what's behind the wall, consideration of grant dollars, pressure to find new location, temporary student housing. So that is the feedback we received from the steering committee last week. I don't know if you guys have any questions about that, but right now, based on our meeting with the steering committee over the last 5 months, community outreach, this has been the #1 recommendation for Grace Best.
The partial demolition?
Correct.
Option?
The one we're looking at now.
So currently there's 62,000 feet, and I'm back on your cost estimates. A full remodel of that is 280 a square foot, whereas if we demolish 32K and end up with a 30,000 square foot building, it's 300 per square foot. So at a per square foot cost, the full remodel is slightly less costly. And what's the difference in capacity between the 62 and the 30? It somewhat depends on the program, obviously, but
Sure, and capacity as far as what, Mr. Taylor?
how many students it can accommodate?
If it's educational, if it's totally students, you can't say it was 50% more square feet, so we wouldn't have 50% more capacity. I wish it was that easy. It would probably be likely about 35 to maybe 40% more capacity with the full 62,000 square feet.
As opposed to what is it at 30? Because I don't see that number either.
Sure. Well, I think with some of the demographic studies showed that I don't think that we could prove that educational capacity was really required at this time. But so we didn't really push that, but nonetheless, you're going to have probably 15,000 square feet of admin and shared space, closets and hallways. So the rest could be made into classrooms if that was what the board decided.
So Mr. Taylor, if kind of a general rule of thumb for an elementary student need roughly 125 square feet per student. So dividing that by 32,000 comes out to 256 students you could put in that area if it was just dedicated for student use. And that includes, I mean, that square footage includes, the hallways and admin and everything, so.
Mr. Taylor?
Go ahead.
Just a point of clarification. We're going from 30 to 60,000 square feet. Isn't that a 100% jump versus a 50% jump?
We're going from 62,000 to 30.
Right, but Mr.
Right.
Taylor's question was going from 30 to 60, I believe. Was it not?
Yeah, so you just gave us the answer of about 250 for 30,000. And where I was going is, well, what would 62 be? What would the capacity
Fair enough.
be?
It would be 125 times 30.
It's 496.
About 500. So it almost
About
doubles
double.
capacity. Okay. Other comments, questions? Teresa and Tiffany, I'd like to hear, you guys have been involved throughout, and I'd like to hear from each of you in summary of this whole presentation and where you're at.
Sure. Can I just ask a clarification question? Because unfortunately, I wasn't able to be on the meeting last week. So when the steering committee members came back and talked about active management of the property, can you clarify what that is speaking to?
Sure.
Yes.
Was it in the context of the existing building? And
Well, it's under
maintenance costs?
benefits, for Lewis Palmer taxpayers in the community under a couple of the different options. Third column over.
Well, I think where they were going with the active management is just to have community involved in the process more than it maybe is now.
Can I step up for this for a moment? And I'm sorry if I'm a little bit delayed in the timing. But we went back to the very beginning of the conversation of being data-driven. And we took the data that we currently have, and I think, Kevin, you might have it handy to kind of bring up on the screen if Vicki can allow you access. But what we're looking at is enrollment. And a number of the conversations that came forward were at the very beginning was, we heard that we needed a new school. We heard we needed a new elementary school. We need a new middle school. We're just going to be busting at the seams. It's going to be necessary. And yet when Western Demographics came back and did the analysis a couple years back, prior, candidly, to COVID, which has a greater impact at this time now than it did 13 to 14 months ago. We can certainly see that if we're looking at the elementary schools and the middle schools, and outside of one high school that's at 101% utilization, the other schools are truly in that sweet spot between the 82, 85% and 100% utilization. Question then comes back to us that says, if we're talking about building a new school, for what purpose? Are we building an elementary school for how many children? Are we building a middle school for how many children? And where? And what kind of programming truly will we be able to provide those kiddos if we are looking at X number of kids walking into that school with a certain utilization level that is needed in order to provide excellence of opportunities and programming? The arts, music, great literacy programs, interventions that are needed. So the conversation kind of pushed then for the steering committee away from, wait a minute, we may not need a new elementary school at this time or a new middle school at this time. What we may need is the flexibility to consider opportunities for what is needed for those that we are serving now at Best Grace, and what we can as a complement for students looking forward in terms of the pathways that you all are building. And hence, that's where the steering committee kind of brought us back to, wait a minute, this is where we are in terms of our enrollment. And I think Kevin can show you, what the projections are looking like from a normal average growth, not taking into consideration what COVID is going to look like potentially in terms of students holding back for a certain amount of time coming back to schools. And so if anything, we're looking at this from a conservative perspective, taking in consideration what flexibility do we have with that property and asset that you have right now, making it into a place that is educationally wonderful for those that can be served, and then providing leverage for what can be into the future. And I think that is where the committee got to with this last option that Kevin is presenting to you at this time. So we can certainly go back to the enrollment conversation and what that might look like 5 years out and 10 years out. But I think that's where the general conversation was pushing was, what do we need at this moment to serve our community and give us the flexibility over the next 3 to 5 years? And Teresa and Tiffany, I know you guys are sitting in on all those conversations that we had. So if there's anything I missed, please feel free to add context if you would like.
I think that was a really good summary. I think when you spoke to what were the things that were needed at this moment, I think unequivocally the steering committee came down to they want to continue housing the programs that are there. Homeschool enrichment, transitions, and barobotics, thank you. And then in addition to that, flex space was very, very high. I don't remember the graphs we've seen in previous presentations, but having flexible space, whether that is flexible space that could flex if enrollment were to go up unpredictably, which right now we're pretty flat for 5 years, or also very high desire to have flex space for community programs or other district programming that could be brought to that school site. So it became a conversation much beyond, we need a new elementary school or a new middle school. And quite honestly, as one board member, it was a little relieving to hear that. And it also provides a fantastic opportunity and creative opportunity, actually, for this school district to have a site that is flexible, that we can do a lot of different things with in the future, some of which we may not even be able to predict that we would need now. And then all of that, the housing, the current programs that are there and providing flex space, all within the context of being very, very cost effective was the other thing that came through.
Director Phillips, back to your last question regarding the active management, I guess. Those comments were made to allow the board to make those kinds of decisions with this new building. Active management being flex space, we can look at different options in the next year, couple years with Grace Best.
Okay, thank you. I just was looking at, I guess I put property management together and was wondering if people were thinking we would rent the space out or something. So right. I don't know if that came up. I get it, and I think it was more directed towards active management, or would show that the district has some flexible options, I guess. Tiffany, do you want to add?
Yeah, so I would concur with what Ms. Phillips said. Some of the things, the variables that kept getting brought up in all the different discussions, and is included, is what is going to be the most cost effective? What is going to be the most favorable and serve our community as well as our students? And since our growth is flat right now, we need to make sure that we are being respectful and mindful of the current programs and the shortcomings that building currently serves those programs. So, for example, electrical is not our electrical system is not favorable for our robotics program, and it was a very diverse group. It wasn't. We didn't come to where we landed and where we are right now. It didn't come with. It wasn't a here we are, we can move forward. There was a lot of dialogue back and forth of, well, what about serving our students in a elementary school setting on this side of I-25? Do we need to do that right now? How do we make sure that we are, so that was a question that was brought up often, and is that necessary? We also talked about what are the limitations of that location and that building. The flexibility gave us the opportunity to make sure that we are serving our students now. And I think from the dialogue I heard in the last meeting, I stayed silent and listened, and I tried to do that as much as possible. The demolishing of the 30K square foot and remodeling of the remainder one of the things that was discussed was the older part of the building. If we just remodel it, are we just slapping a Band-Aid on a building that is going to not be able to serve our students the way that our other buildings in our district serve our students in a competitive manner that is safe and makes our students future ready and is of a same value and same quality of what our other buildings that we have in our school district. So we look, but the school question was brought up a lot. And I know that there's probably still some folks on the committee that would wonder, when the time comes 5 years down the road, is that flexible space something that could serve students in a younger age group then? But for the here and now, how can we be cost effective in a way that honors our stakeholders and our taxpayers, in a way that honors our students, and in a way that honors our staff? So that's from what I heard from the committee. Thoughts?
No, not any to add specifically, but I'd like to hear what other board members have to say based on what they've heard so far.
Mr. Schwartz, I think you're queued up with your microphone. I'll go after you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you guys for steering our team and our citizens through this process. Not easy to do. I had some questions as it relates to slide number 9, just to make sure that we as a team have a crisp understanding of our choices and options. And I'll propose it, if it's okay, in a 2 or 3 part question, so you understand the method to the madness, hopefully. Part 1 is when we look at the ACM removal, which I assume is asbestos and something else.
Asbestos containing materials, sir.
Thank you. And the demolition costs. When we look at the cost per square foot, that's amortized in. Is that correct?
Those columns would be costs incurred no matter what option we chose. So
I see.
Whichever one you'd prefer that I do the math, it's a flat fee of, I wish I could see better. $750K. Okay.
750,000.
So we've got, so the 62,000 square feet just keeps us on track of what we're trying to do, but approximately 750,000 for asbestos-containing materials. Even if we decide to raise the building, we'd have to do that.
That's about $12 a foot. And then demolition at 550, around $9 a foot.
Fair enough.
So if we took that off 442, that takes us to 421 a foot, right?
Will you say that one more time?
9 plus 12 is 21. 21 minus 442 is 421, I think.
I see what you're saying.
Okay. So
fair enough.
I just did some brief looking at a 2020 study, may not be credible. Average cost to build an elementary school in Denver, a little bit higher than here, and it had $297 a foot. So my question ultimately is, what's the difference? What drove $297 versus $421? Because in that analysis, they didn't have asbestos or demo. That's question 1, because that's a delta if the numerator were $297 of roughly 33%, which is significant for our taxpayers. So we'd like to understand that. I'm not saying it's wrong, I just want to make sure we understand it. Second piece is, did the committee consider an option of selling the facility as is, with full respect for the fact that we would likely have to do the asbestos mitigation before closing any real estate transaction? Rationale behind both questions, in the spirit of fair play partnership, is you do the quick math. At $300 a foot, 62,000 square feet is about 18 million. We did an assessment, an appraisal, apologies, and it appraised, what was that, about?
4
million, and that was maybe 9-10 months ago?
A little over a year.
Okay, so let's just use that number, not take any real estate inflation, and pop out $1 million for mitigation and expenses, end up with $3 million. We have a piece of land, we build new, even 62,000 feet at $300 a foot. We're at 18 million, less 3 million at 15 million. That's what's going on in my head. say for 15 million, is that a better option than what we have here? And also, if we time it right, we can keep the kids in these classrooms while the new construction's going on.
Fair enough. I'll start with question one first, Director Schwartz. Is the DPS study, first of all, I think they're low, frankly, just for hard costs. I'm not sure what year that was. Was that recent?
2020.
Okay, fair enough. Looked at between 2020 and now, probably 7-8% increase just in the hard costs.
Well, let me clarify your question there. Is that number the hard cost? Does it include the soft cost of furnishing and fixtures? Because they differentiate that here, and I don't know.
I actually don't know. That's why I brought it up in the form of a question.
Fair enough, and I highly doubt that it does. Thank you, Director Taylor. Just because it's easier to get a handle on hard costs of construction, and our firms are involved in the bid openings of new construction of schools weekly, and the trends we've seen are probably 5 to 6% increase per year, so we can tack that on, and I would highly doubt that the DPS shows soft costs. Typical multiplier there is 25%. So we'd look at their cost at $300 and times 25% would get us close to where we're here. I defend my numbers against the DPS number any day.
But may I, again, not the first option, not the demolition, but the second option, upgrade code. So it basically takes the building and brings it up to code without furnishing and fixtures at $201 per square foot compared to, I think, Ron's question about the $297, you get a building. Is that a fair comparison?
I think so.
If indeed that's the right reference.
Yep,
Well,
fair enough.
Ultimately, the question is, have we deeply exercised selling and putting up new to maximize everything Ms. Upchurch just said?
Can you clarify selling and putting up new?
Sure. Putting the property on the market, having the buyer pay us, doing whatever legal mitigation we need to do, adding 33% to this number in the spirit of being conservative, walking with $3 million in our hand, building something brand new on land we already have at $300 a foot, taking $18 million, less than $3 million in our hand, and spending $15 million to have a secure new facility, unfurnished, that has maximum agility, maximum capacity for ebbs and flows in our population for the next 3 decades, maybe locates in a place where there's a specific need for some of that today, and provides us the opportunity to do the incremental things that the community deserves to continue to be ahead of the competition and be a premier district.
May I address the question then?
Yep.
So one of their goals they stated was to maintain current programs, and if we sold it, what are we going to do with those current programs is one question. And then because of the demographic study that shows basically no need for capacity for, I'll say 4 or 5 years, that money will just sit in the bank, essentially, if we sell it. And there's always the, temptation to spend what you got in the bank otherwise. So we'd have to have a pretty strong resolution about its use. But I guess the main concern I have with that concept is, what do you do with these programs that exist?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm not a professional in this field, but if you do the terms of the sale correctly, while the one structure is going up, the other structure stays in place, you either lease back or you do a sale over a window of time, and it would be...
When you say the other structure, you're talking about a new building?
A new structure, for example. You take a year.
Yeah, see, now that complicates it even further.
I didn't say easy, I said functional.
Can I add one other piece of context for you?
But my bigger question was, what was the consideration in terms of sale of the property and other options? And sorry.
So just some context that may not be quantifiable in terms of dollar amounts, but there was conversation early on in the first, I think, 2 meetings,
Yes.
if I'm remembering correctly, and it did come up. The piece of property that the district owns is from, on this side of Big Red, north side, all the way past the bus depot there. So it is a continuous piece of property. If you sell that middle piece, there's a bit of a disjunct there that, perhaps in 50 years, this piece of land may be used differently or as a more comprehensive campus or complex. The other thing that was of interest to me was that there were members of the steering committee that were from the Town of Monument and the Chamber of Commerce, and they actually felt strongly that the district could contribute in a sort of holistic way in terms of Monument. This is somewhat of a historical structure that we're in here, and maintaining a district campus of sorts within the town, they felt could be valuable, especially if it's offering flex space that can be community use. So just one more possibly tangential point, but also adds context.
I think Susan wanted to say. Susan, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I think we need to go back to the challenge of what the facility really, and why we brought the whole steering committee together, and why it was so critical to align the work that you all had put in place for your strategic plan, and then allowing the community to weigh in and base their recommendation and tie that all together. Because we realize that we may not be growing as fast as we are. We realize this is a valuable asset, and how do we maximize that value for the students we serve, as well as potentially for other students within the Lewis Palmer district. And I think that's really where the steering committee rolled forward and took that on and said, what is it that we need and want? And there were certainly people that came back and said, well, what about, we need another property for a elementary school, or we need another property for a middle school, or what about another expansion for CTE? But the reality is, what is it that this asset provides to you all and can provide flexibility going into the future versus the reality that you all are facing? We're not growing by leaps and bounds as we had expected we were. We are not going to be seeing a maximization of your facilities and needing to build another 2 or 3, 4 schools. And I say that facetiously, but that is the argument. Well, we need another school of a middle school or an elementary school. We really didn't see that in the data from what the steering committee brought back. So how do we now take this asset that we have and use it for the benefit of the community and the students that we're serving to move forward? And I think that's what we're bringing forward to you all as a board tonight, is taking all of the information that we have, all of the data, all of the conversations, all of the survey work, all of what the community has said to you all, because it has been a community-driven project. It's not been driven by anybody else but the groups that have been forward-coming and bringing their voices to the table. Now what do we do with this facility as an asset in the most effective, efficient manner to provide great opportunities for the children that we serve and potential children that we can serve in the future?
Oh, go ahead, Susan.
Nope, that's where we are right now.
Okay.
We can
Thank you. Some of the comments that we want to make sure the board understands that are incorporated in those options. Some of the comments had to do with the potential of space for pre-K or maybe a kindergarten as opposed to a K-6, just because they take up less space, but it would be convenient for parents. Those were just discussion points, and I want to make sure the board's clear that we could include that type of space in our cost models, if that is something to consider.
So, go. You haven't had a chance to talk yet.
appreciated Susan's comments about kind of where we're at. And I know this is part of our strategic plan, and that's why we've gone through this exercise, but my question is, where do we go from now? So we have these great options that hundreds of thousands or millions of thousands, we have no money allotted for it, and we don't have the capacity need for the foreseeable future. So what's the next step for the board? And then as a board, are we going to try to obligate future boards down the road based on what we believe that they're going to need from years from now? So I guess this is all great information. I appreciate everyone that's put time and effort in. But Mr. Taylor, what are you asking from us as board members in way of an action item tonight or at subsequent board meetings?
Great question. And what we need to do is they've done this facility master plan. They have considered 5 options, not necessarily selling, but they probably had discussed that issue. There's 5 options. What I'm hearing is a partial demolition and a remodel of that remaining 30,000 feet, which is the lowest cost. Is that accurate? Is that the recommendation of your work?
Yes.
So-
Just that we had to put it to a vote with all the members that had been involved in the one option that got the most number 1 votes was the 50-50 split.
So if that's the recommendation of this effort, then the question becomes, and that's really what phase 2 is about, right? Phase 2 is, well, if we have a 30,000 square foot building that has been remodeled for the maximum flexibility into the future, what will the school district do with it, and when do they need it? Those are the questions that are follow on to this work. Now, I tend to believe that this board has an obligation, because we engaged these folks, to accept this recommendation and then authorize the school district to determine, well, what does that mean? How would they use it? When would they need it? Et cetera, et cetera. How would we finance it? I mean, there's many questions, but this phase was about an acreage with the existing facility, and what do we do that to optimize it? And I think what I'm hearing is partial demolition and remodel the 30,000 feet to a state of future flexibility that then the school district, which I think is phase 2 in all of this, is, well, what does that mean then? If we have a 30,000 square foot building that could hold 250 elementary kids, and or existing programs, and or a high-tech option of who knows what, right? Those are the things that are part of the next step, because I think we need to get through phase 2, which includes how would we pay for it, before we can really make a decision on next step. I think at this point, unless I'm misunderstanding what we've engaged you to do, was given that property, its size, its location, its state of being, the recommendation is remodel the older part and demolish the older part, remodel what's left, and have a 30,000 square foot building that is future proof. I'm going to use that term. It has the flexibility to be used by the school district depending on their needs. And I don't think it answers the question of when, though, and I'm not sure they should.
Can I share
Please.
some observations I made as well? When the questionnaire was sent out, and remember, this questionnaire was sent out to the entire community. So yes, the idea of selling it to an entity was brought up. The committee, and when I heard dialogue and discussion within the committee, was that the reason that it didn't have the most traction, but also this is a district-owned asset. This is let me rephrase that. This is a taxpayer-owned asset. And so this is an asset we have that we can utilize. And the reason we are looking at this now is at some point that building is going to continue to degrade, and we can't keep kicking the can down the road. So what can we do to utilize and be the best stewards to our taxpayers and our students? And that's where the committee landed. Selling it was absolutely brought up, but the question is, why would we sell it if we already have a building that we can use? And The reason we looked at flex space is it gives us the opportunity to be future focused. And the reason we looked at CTE, career and technical, is that is something that our is not as competitive. We've come a long way, but when we look at our neighbors, that's something that we heard from our community many times over, that not every student is four-year college bound, and that there's so many opportunities for our students if we can provide them with opportunities such as robotics and healthcare, and just different. It opens the door for so many of our students at a minimal cost, and it addresses our needs now, and it makes it flexible in the future. So that's my observation from what I really appreciated about this entire process is this committee was very transparent. Everything, the recordings of all the meetings are online. Anybody who signed up to be a part of this committee was allowed to be a part of this committee. So this was one of the most transparent and collaborative efforts I have seen in this community. And I want to also say thank you to everybody that participated. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you to all the community members that showed up.
So, Matt, I'm going to come back to your question again, and I'm actually going to make a motion. And the motion I'd like to make is that we accept this study and their recommendation, and we ask our school district admin to do phase 2, which is determine how and when it could be actually utilized. Because this is a conclusion of a lot of work and effort, and so the recommendation is to accept this proposal as it's presented and ask the school district administration to move to phase 2.
Is there, could I,
comments, questions?
yes, my comment is more of a question for my fellow board members. Would it help us be accountable in terms of keeping things moving forward and finally, I don't want to say, well, I'll say it, lay the Grace Best issue to rest, to put a time frame on it for the district to let us know costs or options within X amount, X time frame. Is that something that we would want to add, or is there a...
Can I offer a
Yes.
thought on that? So as we went into this process, looking at exactly what we hoped to achieve, I think it was a twofold. One was the community engagement aspect. The second was, what are we going to do there, which now we have a conceptual plan for. So what I would recommend is, as you give us direction then to engage in phase 2, that we do a very similar process. We will continue to work with our partners, with Answer and Cooperative Strategies, to design exactly that scope and that timeline and what you can expect as far as those deliverables. Obviously, that's work that will commence as we're moving through the summer and then into the beginning of next year. So I think we can be more detailed now that we have this direction, to be able to come back to you and say, okay, here's exactly how we're diving into phase 2. Anything else you'd add to that, Kurt? Or
I could provide a proposal, Dr. Summers, that would reflect kind of a timeline and costs, because what we want to avoid is bringing on an architecture firm or engineers or and designing something and then have it not be used. So what we would propose is the selection process of an architect. Next step is to get an architect on board. They meet with a new committee maybe, or our old committee, and go through the options and provide some options for your review, approval or disapproval at that point of what we want to do with that 30,000 square feet. Excuse me. Then we would look at kind of the costs of each of those uses. And so we could have phase 2, part 1 would be the selection of an architect. Doesn't cost a lot of money. What's nice about that process is that we bring maybe 5 qualified architects and get their ideas right away as part of their presentation to get selected. So we'd look at immediately, doesn't cost us anything, and we look at 5 different professional architecture firms' ideas of what to do. That's what I would suggest we maybe do first. Out of those, we select one firm. they would help us do the phase 2 of the planning of the building on a floor plan use, total cost. After that, if we like our work, if we continue to move forward, we'd bring a contract board process of real dollars those options. And I can spell this out in a proposal.
And all the while, the only thing I would echo or add would be, obviously, the funding options are going to have to be something that we engage the community to be able to process through and understand ultimately what we're working with and how all of that can come together. I do think, without going into a lot of detail right now, there are more options than just thinking about pursuing a bond. And yet, we also have to keep in mind the scope of everything that we have in front of us and what all those pros and cons are as we're detailing all of that out. Work that you're commissioning us to take on as we're moving forward.
But Teresa, I would like to add to that this is all in the context of our comprehensive strategic plan. So this is really just, I don't want to make this its own project exclusive of our comprehensive plan. It needs to fit the overall comprehensive plan, which I don't think we're going to be through until maybe next year at this time. It's going to take another year to really get through that and have a longer term vision that looks at personnel, looks at finances. We got a new chief human resource officer. We got a new CFO. It's going to take them a period of time to get up to speed. So I'm reluctant to put too much pressure on pushing this forward outside of the context of our comprehensive strategic plan.
Sure. No, and I appreciate that. I wouldn't want to put pressure. It was more about accountability and community expectations so that they know what to expect moving forward.
And the one thing I would, first of all, thank you, Dr. Summers. As always, you're very articulate. What I would like to know is each step of the way how much this is going to cost and where the money is going to come from. You know, unfortunately, with the proposed bond and the elementary school we hope to build, that kind of spiraled a little higher than we would like. Considering we're concerned about where PPOR money is going to come in, I think we need to be very judicious with the limited funds that we have. And then if we do have the available resources, then we take the next step.
Perfect. That fits within that comprehensive plan as well. Other questions or comments?
So my only question would be, as it applies to the motion on the floor, being a part of this process, I am confident in being able to say yes. I just want to make sure at the risk of kicking the can down the road that I just said I don't think we should do, have we given everybody enough opportunity to digest it, chomp on it, mull over it before voting? Or I know where I stand, but I just want to be respectful and mindful of anybody else.
I've been paying attention along the way. I haven't attended meetings, but you've kept us well informed. Ron?
I think what Ms. Upchurch, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's more of a community, right?
Mm-hmm.
The community has been engaged, but we're essentially putting a motion in front of that we're going to be voting on, and we really haven't given the community due process, so to speak.
Well, hold on. Everything I just heard them describe was about community engagement.
Well,
and all we're saying, the motion only is saying, let's accept their recommendation. We're not talking about how we're going to utilize it. That's the next step.
Well, that's correct, Chris, but if you look at the agenda, it says motion under executive content. So correct me if I'm wrong, was it a proposed motion submitted to the public?
We actually didn't even include language for this particular.
I did that on my own.
Okay, so, and Chris, I don't have a problem voting on it, but I think Ms. Upchurch brings a good point. Yes, we're not allocating funds, but it would be nice to kind of finish the process, given the public the opportunity to know that we're voting on this, give them the opportunity to come here, offer public comments, then perhaps we vote. That's my 2 cents.
Might I suggest one more layer? And I think we may be able to do both. What I appreciate about the motion that is currently on the table is that it helps represent back to our community engagement folks that we hear you, we see you. What I'm actually going to recommend, and I would love to work with whoever on the board would like to take a lead step in this, is that we draft a resolution. And that draft resolution puts into writing everything that we're talking through here. It clearly defines the efforts that have taken place, the conceptual plan that we have in front of us, and the next steps in terms of the directives that the board is creating for the district. If we have a draft of that resolution by June 1, our next work session / special meeting, that could be the first review, and then we could pursue a second reading of that resolution at the June 14th meeting, which would allow our community to be able to read, review, offer additional comment. To me, that kind of achieves both. Make a good point, Mr. Klassen. It's still in somewhat of a conceptual phase, but I would appreciate that we're making that concrete as we're bringing more focus to that effort.
So who would like to participate in that process?
I'm glad to draft it if we need it.
Okay.
Or help.
That'd be great.
Okay, so I withdraw my motion, and we will follow this plan. That is, we will get a proposed resolution drafted for our work session on June 1st, and then we'll go through the process and we'll vote on it at the June meeting. Thank you, gentlemen, for your work. And Sarah, thank you for your efforts as well.
Susan.
We appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan.
Bye, Susan.
Bye, Susan.
She knows what you meant. Thank you, Dr. Summers.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Vicki, can you grab the mic while I'm getting Shannon on the phone?
It's 10:43 in Michigan.
Oh, she's awake. She's been waiting for this all day.
Hello?
Miss Seeley?
Yes.
Ooh, hello.
Hello. How is everyone?
We're doing
I think
well.
You're speechless.
So this is now agenda item D3, our financial planning analysis. So we're just going to look at the regular monthly reports that we've seen for the last year. Does anyone have any questions about these slides? The enrollment slide and the graphs that we use to monitor financial activity?
I don't, Mr. Taylor. Thank you.
No questions.
No questions.
Okay. Then let's move then to D4, which is our 2021-2022 preliminary budget. Dr. Summers and Mrs. Seeley will present that.
Yes, we are ready to go. So Shanna, I'm going to drive the slides if you want to start on slide 2.
All right, so on slide 2, you will see that the projected PPOR is coming in currently at $8,429.08 per full-time student. And just to point out that before the budget stabilization factor, that PPOR would have been over $9,000 per full-time student. So keep that in mind as we continue to deal with that budget stabilization factor. We are still looking at the projected enrollment of 6,378 pre-K to 12 students across all programs. That is the same as what we reported on earlier this month at the board work session, so that number has not changed. And that is anticipating a net enrollment decline from this current year of 139 full-time students. Within this budget draft, you will see, again, based on what we were directed by you board members at the work session, a staff compensation increase of certified staff receiving a $500 step to their base, plus a percentage increase on top of that, which averages out to about a 2% raise across the board. Classified staff would see an approximate 2.5% raise. Administrative staff would see an approximate 1% raise. And this was a overall cost to the budget of approximately $839,000. And now on the next slide, just to kind of demonstrate how we are continuing to operate profitably prior to some one-time expenditures. So total revenue prior to all transfers is almost $59.5 million projected. And we are projecting just over $47.6 million in general fund expenditures, which would leave us to a net gain of $11.8 million prior to all transfers. And then if we look at the portion allocated to Monument Academy, that's $8.6 million, which then would reduce that net gain down to almost $3.2 million. And then transfers to the insurance, transportation, preschool, and pupil activity funds come in at about $3.15 million, leaving almost $28,000 net gain to fund balance is how we are projected out for the 21-22 school year. And then additional transfers that are needed for one-time expenditures coming up are $580,000 for food services, which we will extrapolate a little bit on the next slide, and $2.6 million to the Capital Reserve Fund. So for food services was self-sustaining since 2009 until this current year. And COVID negatively affected these operations due mainly to the inability to sell a la carte items, which is where we are able to pay for things like staffing and overhead. And so this $580,000 food service transfer that we are projecting for next year, we do believe that's conservative and could easily come in well under that. But given the unknowns due to COVID, how COVID affected things this year and what that's going to look like next year, we want to be super conservative.
Excuse me, Shannon?
Shannon, we got a question?
Yeah, so I want to make sure the 580 is based on this year, 2020 to 2021. That's our experience, given the full pandemic effect. And you've used that same effect in our budget, so that's why it's most conservative, because it can't be worse than this, I can imagine.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. And then $2.6 million transfer to the Cap Reserve Fund is for $1.8 million for the Schneider Electric project, over $800,000 for the Lewis Palmer High School chiller replacement. There is almost $31,000 in the Palmer Ridge High School geothermal project that's in excess of set-aside funds. And then almost $12,000 of that is deferred maintenance, additional deferred maintenance. So I think, Dr. Summers, you're going to take the next few slides to talk about the Schneider Electric partnership.
Yes. So this is a preview to our June 1st work session special meeting where we will hear the finalized figures for the Schneider Electric partnership. What I just wanted to highlight for you, given the current update that we've received from Schneider, is that we are working toward, through this partnership, the alleviation of $9.2 million in unfunded capital improvement needs, which will also reduce our current operating and utility costs by 22%. The minimum life cycle savings over a 20-year period that we will generate from this project is $9.8 million, which we're projecting. Yep.
Is that what they're guaranteeing?
That's the guarantee.
Okay.
The actual projected savings is closer to 10.7. What we are looking at in order to execute this contract is currently, and I need to adjust this figure, we call out a 1.8 upfront contribution from cap reserves, and we're still working through the actual lending proposals that we've received from the RFP that was submitted just a couple of weeks ago. So this number is subject to some fluctuation, but one of the things that we are identifying upfront is about $275,000 that will come from our ESSER 2 allocation, which would bring down that total upfront contribution from any reserves that we're talking about transferring over. I also want to reiterate and call out that of that 1.8 or 1.6, if you want to look at it that way right now, 1.1 will specifically go toward our security vestibules at 3 of our different locations, as well as this includes the Lewis Palmer Middle School boiler project, which we have currently applied for best grants for. We're awaiting the decision from the state in terms of whether or not we'll either have that grant funding or if we have to cover the other 40%. I think we're looking at about a $400,000 investment, assuming that the best grant does come through. So I just wanted to zoom in a little bit on that. That, again, will be more detailed as we go into June 1st. Any questions on the Schneider project that I can help address?
Well, I do have a question.
Please.
So you talked about the Lewis Palmer Middle School boiler here with
Please.
the BEST grant. On the previous slide, you had a Lewis Palmer High School chiller
Yes.
replacement. Is there a BEST grant associated with that as well, or not?
We are not eligible to pursue a best grant for that chiller
Can you expand on why?
because they do not typically see cool air as being something that
That's a
meets
luxury.
their- yes. However, hot air is covered by the best grant. So, yeah.
When will we know?
I think we're meeting, when are we presenting, Bob? Okay.
And how long is their decision process?
Week or so.
Okay.
I think we were told by the end of the month. So,
So we'll have some hard numbers in June.
Ideally, yes.
Good.
Yes. Yes. Nice job there, Bob.
Dr. Summers?
Sir.
With respect to the vestibules, which is something that's been top of mind for us for a couple of years
14
now.
years.
Yeah, and obviously physical safety and security of our staff and kids is very, very, very high on our priority. I just want to clarify, it's my understanding that in the current, most recent proposal from Schneider, this also includes the 3M film in the areas of potential risk across the district.
That's affirmative.
To complete that project.
I'm looking at Mr. Coates, and he is nodding.
And that includes the additional
affirmation.
100,000.
And I'm looking at Mr. Foster, who's also nodding in affirmation.
Yeah, well,
with a thumb up.
got a validation effort going on there.
But those physical safety components
huge
that we could have done before the kids and the staff walk in August are significant in terms of deterrence and capacity to respond.
No doubt. I think we have one more, maybe a couple more slides here. So I'd like to also just spend a moment touching on the Palmer Ridge High School geothermal project. So as you recall, we are preparing for phase 1 and 2 of this project going into summer of 2021. The total cost for phases 1 and 2 is around 1.6. So we've currently set aside some funds, and I know there may be some discussion, additional discussion about this in terms of transfer from building reserves to cap reserves. One very straightforward transfer aligns to the geothermal settlement that was completed last fall to the tune of 1.1. We also are transferring the Woodmore water easement sale that was completed last year. It's not a ton of money, but that $63,000 helps. And then there is some conversation around that $415,000, which is cash in lieu, which is also interest on those investments. But I want to make sure that we're working on the same page there, because I think in historical practice we have previously perhaps transferred some of those dollars. However, I want to be clear that that $415 may not be best situated for a cap reserve project, could still remain in building reserves. If we go in that direction, of course, we would have to come up with an additional $400,000 out of our district reserve in order to account for that. I know it was a conversation Mr. Taylor and I had just briefly, so anything you want to touch on there?
You all know what cash in lieu of is?
Mhm.
So when a lot is sold in the area, we get a little bit of money, cash in lieu, right, of property. So it's like we get a developer that will make a subdivision, give us some land as a part of that subdivision. If they don't do that, then they do this cash in lieu. It's a nominal amount, but it does add up. And it's always been my understanding that the cash in lieu is no different than like the sale of the property where we sold to Monument Academy, and we put that money aside for future building capacity. So in my mind, the cash in lieu should be held in trust as part of a capacity reserve, not transferred to deferred maintenance.
We just wanted to call that out in light of the fact this is a preliminary budget to make sure that we're consistent in the way that we understand the purpose of those dollars and the potential impact in the event that we continue to see that as part of a building reserve account, which will earn interest. I know that's something that we are looking a little further into as well.
And the next slide will point out that we're going to have 275,000 roughly of ESSER funds. So the transfer from general funds for this 415, it wouldn't increase necessarily by 415 because the numbers don't yet include that $275,000 credit as I understand it. So it's really about 135,000.
Is 415,000 our total cash in lieu amount right now?
I believe so. Shanna, can you confirm that is the 415, the total amount of cash in lieu that we currently have?
Yes.
Thank you. Also, just need to call out that the geothermal project is a multi-phase project. So we will need to prepare for phase 3 and 4 summer of 2022, and we're anticipating that cost to come in right around 1.2. Mr. Foster, can you?
That is the estimate as of now.
Okay.
Based on current costs.
Understood.
Question on that?
Sure.
So, Mr. Foster, if we were to sign a contract tomorrow, would the cost be fixed? Even though it might take 2 years for 2 phases?
Not sure who would give us a guarantee with the current inflation.
Okay.
Because bluntly honest, they're facing such skyrocketing costs, I'm not sure that a firm could give us that increased rate right now. Might be able to explore that possibility or not.
Okay. Does it at least warrant discussion when the time is right? So that we can plan.
I can discuss that with our own representative, they may see what the best path.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe worth an additional work session dialogue at some point to help you understand more of the ins and outs of all of that. There's quite a bit of behind the scenes work that's taking place. And our last slide, a little tongue-tied here, is just a rundown of our current ESSER 2 projections. So you see that 1.2 amount of total funding. Following MA's allocation, we're sitting on around 1.038. And going down that allocation of funds, those are all allowable funds in the course of how we're choosing to use this initial or second round, of ESSER dollars, keeping in mind something I do want to call your attention to at that last line is that we did lose approximately $170,000 in title funding. This is a result of the census data that came back, and we are at a lower rate of families in our community that are qualifying for free lunch. And as a result, that loss of funding we are having to absorb with these ESSER II dollars, at least for next year. The longer term impact of those loss of title dollars, we're still going to have to spend some time exploring. That represents a pretty significant hit in terms of resources and supports that we have for our schools as they're working with our students who are in need. So that is not good news. However, the fact that we do have a dollar amount that we can use to cover that right now, and we are not at this point projecting exactly how we'll spend ESSER III. We're envisioning that that analysis will lead us into next fall in terms of timing for how we'll be looking at those allocations as a function of ESSER III.
So these credits, this allocation of these funds are in the budget that we're reviewing here.
Shanna, can you confirm that? Did you hear that question?
All of these expenses are not included in the budget because they will be part of Fund 22. So they are in Fund 22, not in Fund 10.
So these are like technical equipment or software licenses over and above what's in our operating budget.
That's correct. These are not looped into that operating budget, right, Shanna? It's that.
Correct.
Okay.
And licenses, software licenses are typically annual renewals. And therefore, as we look at the following year's budget, assuming we have the same number of licenses on the same number of computers, we'll need to just account for that. In the scope of 50 million, 80,000 is not necessarily significant, but we should at least understand
It's a recurring expense we'll definitely need to loop into future years. All right.
So can I ask a couple questions?
Of course.
I'll
cue our question slide.
Yes.
Very well done.
So I do first of all want to say thank you, Shanna, for putting this together and coordinating with all of our staff, because when I'm looking through this, my eyes cross, and I have only gotten to page 5. So I appreciate that.
She appreciates that. She's laughing.
I appreciate it. So my question is, when you talked about Fund 10 versus Fund 22, and we've talked about a flex budget, I want to make sure I'm keeping in, like, focused in. First of all, can you explain the difference again between Fund 10 and Fund 22 in a layman's terms?
Shanna, did you hear that question?
Yes, explain the difference in Fund 10 versus Fund 22?
Yes, please.
Yes, so Fund 22 is our grants fund.
Okay.
So that is where all of the money goes into that fund from any outside grants that we receive, and all expenditures related to those grants. So you'll notice that unless there's some carry forward, which we sometimes do have with grants that carry over from one year to the next. Normally, though, you're going to see that the revenues and expenditures are the same, because we're applying for those grants, we're getting a specific amount, and we're spending that specific amount on exactly what that grant was awarded for. And so those expenditures are not captured in the general fund because they're paid for by grant funds, so they run through Fund 22.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I understand now.
Okay.
So we don't have to vote on this quite yet, because we heard two public comments that drew our attention to our staff compensation, and I remember that we had a presentation asking us to commit and honor a presentation that was given to us by several teachers on how we can continue to work through our steps and as it applies to compensation. I could not find the board meeting where that was presented. I can't remember. Lori, Dr. Benton, do you remember what I'm talking about? Our staff presented. Yes. Yes. Do you remember what time frame that was? Thank you. I was trying to look through that. I just want to make sure that. Yes, sir. Yes. I just want to I want to be able to digest this. There's a lot of great information here. I want to be able to digest when we look at our baseball field that needs work at Palmer Ridge, and we have community members that are willing to work on this and help fund it, and what does that mean for us? But we don't have costs yet, and we look at our flex budget, but those are all part of this dialogue that goes into this, and I think we all understand there's only so much in the pie. I just want to make sure that it's important to me that we're being mindful of, this is one of our main responsibilities as board members, so I want to make sure that we're being fiduciarily mindful and responsible as we go through this, and I'm thankful that we're not voting on it tonight.
If I can just briefly respond. What I'd love to be able to speak to is we would certainly desire to provide as much of a compensation increase as we possibly can in honoring our staff and what that ideal state for their compensation plan could look like. The reality is, and I think you're seeing the numbers as they're presented tonight, we're in a position where what we have included in this draft budget is what we believe we can reasonably commit to, not only for this upcoming year, but in keeping in mind future years. We're going to need to find more revenue in order to be able to change the game, so to speak, to be able to get to that. I know Mr. Schwartz uses the term parity. We can think about it in terms of ideal state. I just want to make sure that you know that at this point, what we've presented in this budget is about the extent of what we have available, unless we wanted to do something different, but I don't think you're able to see where those additional revenue dollars would be able to come from right now. The capital reserve projects, I know this isn't your question, but the fact that those are one-time, non-recurring costs, and as you know, we are dealing with a long list of deferred maintenance that we just have not addressed for several years. That's where we feel like by prioritizing it as we're going into this next year, that we are actually addressing issues that will have cost savings for us in years to come. So we feel confident that that's a good use of our dollars at this point in time, or community dollars. And certainly we are open to more feedback and always different points of view. And so this is our draft. This is what we have in front of you this evening. So you know, timeline-wise, we will present the final draft, or excuse me, final budget for approval at the June 14th meeting, but we will be making the information public. We'll put out public notice. As you know, we do all of those pieces consistent with state statute, and this is the time of year that we're in. But I would love to zoom more into that compensation issue. I just don't know how to reasonably make that happen for next year. That's going to be concerted efforts as we're moving into next year and beyond to really dive into that deeply.
Fair enough.
Anything else? I would just like to recap what I think I'm seeing here. One is they're forecasting a decline in enrollment of 139 students times 8,500. That's a significant decline in receipts. Is that adjust staff levels?
There's definitely been some staffing, I don't want to call it reduction, but some positions that have been unfilled or will remain unfilled. But it's not a drastic FTE reduction at this point in time.
And if I look at the enrollment data in the month of May, we have 6,565 students. The October count, we had 6,491. So I can't quite tie out to the 139 number, and I don't need to right now. I'm just pointing it out.
That's fair.
But the point here is that's a flexible budget, right? We agreed last year we were going to actually wait until we get our October count before we can finalize. So we're all on board that this is a preliminary flexible budget that we will still modify once we have the actual head count. That'll eliminate a lot of variances for us. Two, that was my first point. My second point is, if I understand this correctly, our operating budget is virtually break even, but the district is asking that we potentially transfer 580 for food services, which I heard, and I think you all heard, is very conservative. I can't imagine it being that much, but it's what they're asking for in this preliminary presentation. And then they're asking for, I'm going to change the cap reserve a little. I'm going to increase it by 135,000. So that would be like 2.8 roughly. They're asking for 2.8 million in one-time capital expenditures from reserves because it's not in the operating receipts. That's what this preliminary budget is asking us to consider. The reason I changed it is because I, as one board member, won't support transferring cash in lieu of to our deferred maintenance. It's designed for over time to be a part of our building reserve. So, any other comments or questions? Because that's sort of a recap of what I see them doing here. Any questions based on that feedback?
I guess we are looking for direction then. What do we do with that 415? And I don't know that that's a vote, but I'm just wanting to make sure that we're on the same page with that.
I think it should stay in the building reserve.
Okay.
Do you guys have any ideas, thoughts that you want to share?
Well, my thought, when I first saw that, my initial thought, of course I always have a thought, was that cash in lieu of is meant to be used towards our students as we increase in population for a new building. So over time. So I understand that concept. And that actually did pop in my mind.
I have a quick question on that 415 number. Shanna, you still awake?
I am.
You're going to catch the late show finally, huh? So here's the question. Of the 415, how much is money coming in from developers and builders, and how much is interest on our cash balance at the state level?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get it for you.
What's your estimate? What's your gut?
The majority is going to be cash in lieu.
Okay. That's all we need to know. Doesn't change your math, Chris, is my point.
So, last year, what did we approve out of reserves? 1.3, 1.4?
6, I thought, at the end of it.
1.6. So they're asking this year, potentially, if worst case, I'm going to call it, 3.4 out of reserves to pay for these items. And that's what we have to be thinking about, and I'm going to leave it at that. I don't think we need to talk about it, but that's what they're asking for. My point here was that 414,000, I won't support moving that out of the building reserve as one board member.
With the proposed budget, if it's 3.4, that will put our reserves right around what?
11?
11? Okay.
Is that right? Yeah, pretty close. We had about 7.5 excess after last year, so this is going to take 3.5. So there'll be 4 million excess reserves.
That's rough. And
Shanna,
yes,
is that pretty close?
Shanna, are you good with that number?
Roughly, yes.
It's close, yeah. And I'm going to talk to it this way, just briefly, just for our benefit. We're getting close to 12 million in deferred maintenance by doing what we're doing. So there is a huge, it may seem like a lot of money coming out of reserves, but those reserves exist in part because we didn't do deferred maintenance over time. And so if we spend the money now, we're getting closer to 12 million of value for a $3 million investment. So the Schneider Electric thing is a real plus, and that's just my opinion. It's a good investment, is what I'm saying.
And we look forward to more of those details being shared with you on June 1.
Awesome. We good for now? Thank you. Let's go to D5, and I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
I do, of course. It's late, and I know that it's already 9:15. There's 2 items on here that I'm not ready to vote on yet, because I want to be able to, again, digest them. That's number 9, classified staff wage and salary schedules, and the teacher salary schedule. And the reason I'm not ready to vote on those 2 yet is our teachers are part of our stakeholders, and when we listen to all input, and this is input that's given to us, and this is 50 teachers, and I want to be able to give the due diligence and the attention that they're asking of us to read through this document. So I'm not ready to vote on those 2 items yet. Do we have the luxury of time to pull them and vote on them in June?
We could pull them and put them on the June agenda. Just to be clear, the way those are presented right now is reinforced by how we drafted the preliminary budget.
Sure, I understand.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is you want to... What would you like us to do, is my question.
I would like to learn and understand this proposal and this suggestion that's given to us. And I would like the opportunity, and it may not change, but I'd like the opportunity to learn more and just give it the attention that our teachers are asking us to give it.
We're happy to do that. And I would respectfully ask for even more clarification. I want to be able to do what they're asking us to do. We do not, as you can see, have the funding to be able to pull that off right now. So just being really transparent here in my thinking, I do not want to create a perception of not, but I also don't want to create a perception of, by diving deep into this, that there's going to be the ability to actually do what I think we all desire to do, but may not be able to right now.
Well, I think it would also be prudent to tie it in with our budget vote in June as well.
Okay.
And Tiffany, my assumption is you want to make it part of the long-term strategic plan so that maybe we don't get there in one fell swoop, but we get there over the course of a reasonable window of time so everybody can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Yes. That's a fair assessment.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask again, you really do want to pull them out of this, because this is what is in that budget, and this budget is virtually break even. There's no more room in that budget to increase that particular this year. And I don't want to create a perception that there might be, because I'm not seeing it. And this was a step that we made given what was available. And I tend to agree with what Ron said, is in our long-range comprehensive strategic plan, we want to find, I'll use the word I've heard earlier tonight, parity for our teachers compared to other school districts. Well, because our PPOR is less than average, we're going to have to find a different way to fund that. And it's not going to happen in a month. The level of detail that needs to go into this to really come up with, here's the roadmap to get to parity, isn't going to happen in the next month, in my opinion. Ron?
Just to add a little fuel to Chris's fire, I've been diving into this for the last 4 or 5 weeks with Dr. Summers and several others. And there has to be a methodology of how you determine what parity looks like and why. It has to be defendable. So it's not an event, it's a process.
Sure.
It's warranted, it's the right thing to do. The team has earned it. But we just want to make sure when we do it, it's logical, defendable, and stands the test of time.
And Tiffany, we're not saying we're not going to pay attention by having that in here. This is what we've got in that budget that we're going to be voting on. And right now that budget's break even. So, you know, unless they can find a really sharp pen to find more money somehow, some way, this is pretty much what's going to happen on the budget. And so, you know, the commitment, tying this to the budget and holding it out for any reason, to me, it creates expectations that aren't realistic.
I respectfully see it differently as part of the process, because I see it as directly tied to next year's budget. And I don't want to create false hope, but I do want, within our budget's not set in stone. If it's set in stone, then why are we bothering to listen to community input? And we do so because we're required to. And so I think that it's fair enough to allow that process to work through. And since it's tied to next year's budget, what's the harm in waiting one more?
There's no harm in it. And not only that, but why don't we wait until the October account? Because it's a flexible budget anyway. And then we'll have the real enrollment number. And that's what we'll end up doing if we go down this path. Now, as we go down the path, we can say, okay, well, given the preliminary budget, this is what we can do today. Well, that's, I think we all said, we're using the flexible budget model. Once we get the actual enrollment, we will have some flexibility if enrollment's higher. Well, what did we do last year with that?
We were able to give an additional.
So, again, we can pull that out. We can go through it on the work session. I'm cautious about creating any kind of expectation that there's no more than what's there right now. That doesn't mean that in October we won't know better. In fact, we will know better. And I hope it's better than whatever the number is. I hope it's better. And we'll do the same thing then that we did last year.
I was just asking that there be a mindful due process, and that's all I was asking for, is we vote on this before June 30th, and I was not understanding why we're voting on a part of it, and seems like it should be the whole of the budget.
One additional piece, and I was reminded by our executive director of personnel, that absent a salary schedule, we are not able to issue contracts for our teachers. So that is, and pardon me for not bringing that up sooner, but that is one of the operational elements to having this on the agenda in May. As you can see, know what the budgetary impact of this will be. So we would, last year we were at the very last hour in contracts. We are getting a lot of questions from teachers as well. And might I propose one more thing? I think we can absolutely tell our teachers, we hear you, we see you, we will zoom deeply into this issue. It's just not going to be in May, end of May into June. It's going to be one of our priority areas of focus. We've called it out on our strategic plan, and we can dive in and give it all the consideration that it deserves as we do a really thorough job of going into details and then coming up with a game plan that can really help drive that additional revenue ask, if that's what it turns out to be.
So if we pull it out of this consent agenda, and
we will not be able to issue contracts.
That makes logical sense. And that is a compelling argument. Which is why I asked that in the first place. Thanks, Bob.
Any other comments or questions?
Okay. That's a fair, compelling argument. I agree.
And in no way, shape, or form is anybody here saying we're not going to look at this matter. I mean, this is high priority for all of us.
Yeah, quite the contrary, right?
Any other comments on the consent? Can we vote then, Ms. Wood?
Aye.
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 That concludes our regular meeting. I need to make a motion to convene to executive session in accordance with CRS 24-6-402, subpart 4, subpart F, subpart I, to discuss a personnel matter. The board will invite Dr. Summers to join them in executive session in the superintendent's office to discuss Mr. Summers' self-evaluation. Following the executive session, the board members will reconvene in open session. There will be no further discussion, and the meeting will be adjourned.
Do we want to reconvene? Sorry, I don't mean to. Okay, I didn't know that we needed to. I thought we could end the meeting and not.
It's a formality.
Okay.
Fair.
Second.
Any question, comment? Can we have a vote?
Aye.
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 Wherever you want to go.